We're still waiting for a couple board members. I hope they knew that it's the same link. And there we go. Great. Okay. I think we're ready to begin then. I'm going to start the meeting. I call the regular meeting of the Eugene School Board to order on Wednesday, December 1st at 7 p.m. We have all board members present attending tonight on Zoom. We have Alicia Hayes, Gordon Lafer, Laurel O'Rourke, Maya Rabasa, Mary Walston, Martina Shabram, and myself, Judy Newman. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now I will read the land acknowledgement. The Eugene School Board would like to acknowledge that our institution sits on the homelands of the Kalapuya people. In the treaties of 1851 and 1854 through 1855, and the subsequent forced removals of many Indian people from Western Oregon, some of the Kalapuya were moved to the Grand Ronde Reservation and some were moved to the Siletz Reservation. It's important to note that all of Lane County has an important trading and gathering area for camas and other resources. During the Restoration era from 1977 to 1989, Lane County was designated as a service area for the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, the Coquille Indian Tribe, and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians. Eugene School District 4J acknowledges that the descendants of original and service area inhabitants of this land are still here today. They are thriving members of our schools and our communities. Countless members of other tribes now also call our community and schools their home. We wish to thank those original stewards of this land. We as fellow stewards of this land wish to remember that we need to take good care of this land and take good care of all the members of our school district community. Thank you. So the first thing on the agenda is an agenda review. Are there any questions or changes or corrections to the agenda that anyone would like to request? Okay, seeing none, we have agreed. I think we will just accept the agenda as it is and move to the superintendent's comments for tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, Board Chair Newman and board members. Last night, I was honored to greet students and parents at the entrance of the vaccination clinic held at Howard Elementary. During my time at the door, I spoke with a mental health physician volunteering her time at the clinic. She explained to me that 4J needs to continue to add resources to our mental health programs in our schools. She said every school, she said every level, she said everywhere. There can't be too much right now. She knows we are a leader in the state with our suicide prevention program and behavioral safety assessment team, but said we need more. So I want to thank you for providing money from SIA to make this possible, and know that we will continue to meet the needs of our students and keeping adding to our program as it is. It is important to take care of one another, and I want to thank you for allowing some time for our staff to catch their breath in the upcoming months. Thank you for your time and your efforts you put into serving on the board.
Okay, thank you. So the next item are comments from the board chair. So first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to our virtual board meeting. I had the opportunity to attend an EEA-sponsored listening session with teachers from our district. First, I want to thank EEA for organizing these sessions, and I want to express my appreciation to the teachers for taking the time after work to share their thoughts and experiences with school board members and superintendents. I learned so much, and tonight I just want to share 2 of my takeaways. One teacher in my group used a great metaphor to describe how teachers are feeling this year. She said, imagine holding 5-pound weights straight out in front of you. At first, it's easy, but the longer you have to keep holding them, the heavier they feel, until you can't hold them up any longer. And this is how many teachers are feeling after 1.5 years of teaching in the COVID context. The second message that I heard from many teachers is that they feel undervalued and not appreciated or trusted. I want to communicate, I want, that message, I have to say, really hit me hard, because it's the exact opposite message I want to communicate to our amazing, dedicated, and hardworking staff. I want staff to know that you really are valued and appreciated, and thank you for being there for our students and families every day. I want to focus the rest of my time on my comments on just in general on the school board functioning. I know how critically important it is that we figure out how to work together as a board of 7 individuals so we can make sound decisions for our students, staff, and district. This will take all of us being willing to listen to each other openly and with understanding. We will all benefit from hearing from all members equally, and we will make better decisions. We've had many meetings go very late, with our last meeting going to 1 a.m. And I think we all agree that we do not do our best work when we're considering items and taking action that late at night. So I'd like to consciously implement a couple of practices that will help us stay on track and shorten our meetings. First, I ask that board members keep their individual comments to 3 minutes, the same amount of time we give to the public, and I do that myself in my comments. And I've asked Lisa to help us keep on track with timing us as well. Second, I'm asking for your help to implement the practice that each board member gets the opportunity to speak once on a topic before someone speaks again. We can then go to a second or third round if there are new and different points to make that will move the conversation forward. So in that, I ask that we each monitor ourselves, that before we speak, we ask ourselves, is this different than what I shared before? And what is the purpose of me sharing this? So I believe that if we stick to these practices, we can keep to a better time frame that works for us and the public, and we can get more done and ultimately make better decisions. Thank you for listening and for the privilege of serving as the board chair this year. So next up are items raised by the audience, and tonight we have 10 speakers. The school board receives written comments by email at board@4j.lane.edu, and we sets aside time in each regular board meeting to hear public comment. Community members can sign up to speak to the board by submitting the request online at 4j.lane.edu/board/public comment, or contact the superintendent's office. The deadline to sign up to speak is Monday before each meeting. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes and cannot give their time to another speaker. A timekeeper will show a sign when the speaker has 30 seconds left and when their time is up. Speakers may offer objective comments or criticism about district operations and programs. For complaints about individuals, the district has a board policy and complaint process. Please contact the superintendent's office at 541-790-7706 for more information about submitting a formal complaint. Oh, tonight we have 8 speakers, not 10 speakers, apparently. So thank you. I stand corrected. So the first speaker that we have that I think Lisa will usher in is Erica Thesson.
If you just give us a moment, Erica will be joining us.
Great.
Hello, my name is Erica Thesson. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the parent of 2 current and 1 former 4J student. I appreciate the privilege to speak tonight about something close to my heart, 504 plans and neurodivergent students. My youngest is currently in 8th grade. They have a history of being significantly developmentally delayed. We were blessed to be able to get them early intervention from before their first birthday until they entered kindergarten. The first few years of elementary school went fairly well, but by the end of 3rd grade, my student was beginning to struggle in school and socially with friends. By 4th grade, my student was struggling so much in school, their grades started to fall precipitously. They stopped eating or using the bathroom most days at school, and they began to self-harm. I contacted the elementary school and asked to begin the 504 process to get my students some assessment accommodations to make school more positive and successful. I'm sad to report that barriers were repeatedly put up at the elementary level. My student had to struggle every day in the elementary academic system. By the time they graduated 5th grade, they hated school. Once my student entered middle school, we pursued the 504 process again. I'm relieved to say, and I definitely want to shout out Kennedy Middle School, they did a prompt and amazing job meeting with my student and I to figure out the most helpful accommodations. We were able to get some assessments and testing outside of the school setting, and my student was diagnosed last spring with autism, selective mutism, executive functioning deficits, and severe anxiety. My student needs numerous accommodations to work through their functional difficulties and with their strengths to make school more successful, less stressful, and less traumatizing. But I cannot help but think of the fact that we saw deficits and difficulties before the end of 3rd grade, and my student did not get a 504 plan to accommodate their neurodivergence until 7th grade. That is nearly 4 academic years interrupted by unmet needs. According to the CDC, in 2020, 1 in every 54 children in America is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. There are many more, especially girls and non-binary students, who are overlooked and underdiagnosed. The CDC also reports that 1 in every 42 boys and every 189 girls in America is diagnosed as neurodivergent. I know right now staffing and funding levels are stretched much too thin, but I'm urging the board and the district to focus on improving how we support and teach our neurodivergent students in the district. We need to streamline and improve the 504 process so that we are helping students and families and not making them feel like a burden for seeking support. And we need to make sure we get them rapid access to the support and assessments to nurture them best in academia. We also need to have educators and staff at all levels receive trauma-informed training to better identify if students may be neurodivergent and ways to help advocate for the student and families to get the support they need so that they can thrive in our education system. My heart breaks for the trauma my child has endured being neurodivergent in a system built for neurotypical students. So on behalf of Autumn, may we have not one more neurodivergent student missed or overlooked. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you. Our next speaker is Naya Ross.
I'm not sure if Naya is on now. We can move to the next speaker, Carmen.
Okay, Carmen Duato. Is she here? Hi, Carmen. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
And I believe she's coming in now.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, 4J School Board, for your time and service during these challenging times. The last few years have been like no other. I, Carmen Duato, have come before you today as a parent of 2 4J students and as a middle school teacher at Cal Young Middle School. After listening to the school board meeting last time, I felt it was important to share my story and the story of others. First, I work with an amazing team who cares deeply about our students and their families. They work beyond the call of duty to try to make our schools a safe and inclusive environment for all students to learn. However, what I have felt and what I have seen this year is not like any other year. I don't just feel tired, I feel exhausted, physically and mentally. I work on average 8 to 10 hours on the weekend and several evenings during the week, planning, updating Canvas, grading, and emailing. And I'm not alone. Many of my colleagues face the same challenges. During the school day, I teach, monitor the hallways during passing periods, spend my lunch communicating with staff about student issues that need immediate attention. I spend my prep period meeting with my content team, communicating even more student issues, grading, and helping students in the hallway who are in distress. The mental health challenges of our students are impacting our classrooms and their ability to learn. We are seeing more students with little to no motivation, problems focusing, challenges with re-socializing, suicide ideations, housing and food insecurity, and daily disruptions which lead to failing grades. I propose we bring back volunteers into our schools with proof of vaccination. We can begin with bringing back our middle school mentor program. This would help the well-being of our students, assist our school counselors, and relieve staff members. I also propose a public campaign with a focus on how the public can help support students safely. I believe people want to help and they just don't know how to. I also propose we look at unconventional ways to assist our counselors who are extremely overwhelmed. Why not reach out to local universities for graduate students attending counseling programs? This could enhance our counseling services to provide relief to our stressed staff members. Counseling interns need practitioner hours. Why not get their hours in our schools? Or reach out to graduate student programs to help lead affinity groups. Lastly, I propose we reevaluate our professional development to fit our current needs. We can't simply go back to pre-pandemic business as usual with professional development and meetings in January. We are teaching during unprecedented times. This calls for rethinking how we utilize our time. I see this as an opportunity for effective change and to do better in our community. We need to take action now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you. So do we have Naya join us, Lisa?
Not quite yet. We can move to Larry
Just-
Lewin.
Okay, Larry Lewin. Hi, Larry, you're on.
Thank you, board members and Superintendent Sydney, for your dedication and hard work for our community, especially this year like no other in history. I'm Larry Lewin, retired 4J teacher, now member of CAPE. First, I want to congratulate you for your short, effective extra meeting last Tuesday evening. I was late logging onto Zoom to watch, and the meeting was already over. You worked with the superintendent's revised list to find dates for additional non-student days and voted 7-0 to adopt them. My congratulations. Important to our staff and important to let our families know well in advance. Now, last spring, the Oregon Department of Education announced a plan for returning to school this fall after last year's pandemic-related changes and challenges. I'm quoting from the ODE website. This fall, we are returning to full-time in-person school. For students, families, and school staff, this may bring about feelings of excitement, opportunity, anticipation, uncertainty, and nervousness. That nervousness is normal. The Oregon Department of Education is asking every school district to welcome its staff and students back with Care and Connection Week, devoting the first few weeks of school to building relationships and community in your schools, creating welcoming spaces. The website goes on to say, during Care and Connection Week and beyond, school administrators are being asked to provide staff, educators, and students with permission and ample time to build care, connection, and community with you, each other, and with students. My question to you tonight, board members, is what is the status of this approach in our 4J schools? Are teachers, principals, and other school-based staff still allowed to focus on caring and connecting with their students, or is 4J back to academically driven, chasing forward to try to catch up from last year using testing as its sole measure? I ask this because as a former 4J teacher, I know the importance of relationships between students and teachers and how those relationships impact student learning. We all recognize that when a student bonds with their teacher, good things happen in the classroom. This is an obvious key component to learning. I ask this because my 16-year-old sophomore granddaughter at International High School told me she doesn't feel she knows her high school teachers very well yet, and it's sometimes unclear about how to reach out with questions and help. A ninth grader from Churchill told me she's missing relationships with her teachers. Neither kid blamed their teachers, they just lamented the lack of closeness. Care and connection is more than a phrase. It's the heart and soul of learning. And not only for our students, but it's true for our teachers. If they aren't allowed care and connection, how can they provide it to their students? This pandemic keeps giving us immense challenges. You board members are faced with guiding our district to health. Our teachers are the key. They always have been. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
So, Madam Chair, we have a couple of people who have names that are unrecognizable. I'm not certain if Harry Sanger is in the audience, but if he could change his name, if he is. James Allen Sapp as well. I don't see his name, but we do have Amanda
Harry.
Voss.
Looks like Harry's here. Great. So Harry, you will be up next then. Or rather, you're up right now. There you go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Superintendent Vanderkar, Chair Newman, and 4J School Board. Thank you for providing the opportunity to speak tonight, although I'm dismayed that it is not in person. We should be moving closer toward normal, not creating further barriers to social dialogue. As I predicted when I spoke to the county commissioners yesterday and emailed the 4J board, conflict was created at last night's public youth gene clinic at Howard Elementary when the authorities stood between concerned citizens and the public officials who don't seem to want people's voices to be heard. You are here to represent how these parents feel too. How can you claim to be fighting historic oppression and standing for justice when you not only support current oppression, but enforce policies segregating and discriminating against a class of people for supporting the right to informed consent? Do you not see the hypocrisy? I imagine you do, or you wouldn't be hiding from the public, further silencing opposing voices. This meeting tonight should be in person, and you should face the people you are discriminating against. Haven't we had enough of this information dominance where only approved propaganda is allowed to guide the decision-making process and facts that challenge this narrative are falsely labeled as misinformation? Is this the example we want to set for our children? That it is okay to bully people who think differently from you as long as your opinion is supported by the majority in power? Is this not the very idea to be addressed tonight when you discuss the equity lens? Oregon now says it is okay to wear a mask outside. When will our children be able to enjoy this policy change? I strongly urge 4J to allow children to remove the masks when outside in accordance with this guidance change with the highest urgency. You're considering a policy on child abuse tonight while you abuse our children, locking parents out of the classrooms and muzzling children amongst other draconian measures in the name of COVID-19. All this to protect them from a disease they already have a strong natural immune response to. This is a fact. This isn't misinformation. What is misinformation is telling families this is a safe and effective treatment. VAERS reports bring the first claim into question, and the news about waning efficacy from the shots refute the second. What is misinformation is claiming informed consent matters when you coerce children into getting the vaccine to get back to normal or be able to take off the mask or participate in extracurricular activities. That's not informed consent, that's implied consent. We are well down the slippery slope I have repeatedly cautioned about, but constantly seems to fall on deaf ears. We've heard concerns tonight about overworked teachers, yet you forced a medical decision on teachers lest they not be able to contact students. How many parents would volunteer if you loosen the restrictions to allow them back in the classroom to help share this load as we have historically seen in the history of 4J? I appreciated Erica Thessen's comments on 504 plans and wonder how her child's needs can be met when teachers and staff are so overburdened. Every week, more parents are growing tired of a fear-based narrative driving our COVID response instead of following the science. Who among the board will recognize these voices? I know that you are all working hard, but it doesn't feel like you are working hard for these parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Our next speaker is Justin McCall. Justin, you can unmute and you're up for speaking right now.
Unmute. Okay, there we go.
Great. We can hear you.
Okay, good. So I'm back again. This time it's a couple things. There was a teacher from from Churchill High School in the IHS department of that high school that gave out some curriculum to some students that was basic word porn. Talking about a guy getting a boner that was oh, I can't even think of the exact words. It's very disturbing. I have contacted the principal of Churchill. I've not heard anything back yet. I don't know if you guys are aware of the curriculum. There are many of us parents that are not too happy about it. And then the other thing is I do not appreciate the fact that someone from this, either the school or your whole entire board, I don't know, but I do not appreciate police coming to my house and attempting to harass me over contacting the school over our child. That is beyond ridiculous and a way overreach. If you guys want to try and threaten me with harassment charges, if I call the school over our child, then I will be placing harassment charges on the people of McCornack Elementary because they have repeatedly called me over our child. And it goes both ways. When police call my phone and try to come to my house over negligence, abuse, neglect of our child in this school, and your guys' way of covering it up is to send police to my house. This is unacceptable. In no way have I ever threatened anyone. The only thing I have ever threatened was police, and when I said I will call them, I called them. Now, you guys sent police to my house. I'm still yet to hear back why and who called them. This is not acceptable. The school is still calling me. So if it continues, then I will be pressing charges for harassment, just like you guys want to try on me. This is not okay. You cannot silence us because we don't agree with you. We are the parents. We choose how our children will grow up. You will not force no vaccine on our children. You can't even force it on the employees anymore. It's federally halted now. And the masks are a joke. If the state announces that the
Mr. McCall, I think your time's up. Thank you. Okay, Lisa.
Okay, we have Amanda Voss.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Amanda. You're on.
See you all. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, now it's loud in my house. Thank you, board members and Superintendent Vanderkar for the time. I appreciate the 3 minutes. Oops, I forgot to start my timer. Lisa, give me another 10 seconds. Just kidding. I came on because I wanted to share that I have been combing through your guiding beliefs and values. I have printed it and taken notes all over it. And I have to say that it's really well thought out. It's very powerful. And I agree with it in like all of it. I love it. I don't know if this is something that you guys go back to often, but it's amazing. And what I wanted to come to say tonight is that because they're so amazing, and due to the space and time that we're at in our community with just like the very, I don't know the word, like it is difficult to get along. It's difficult to hear each other. We all have different goals. We think that they're different. I wanted to come and just like encourage a reset button and offer even myself, I would love to meet with anybody, any of you board members and any parents that would want to work in like a spirit of participation and really searching out like, how do we hear one another and find the common goals with one another right now? Because what you've already committed to and created is a really powerful base to keep moving towards. And I think that if we can work together to just enhance it, there's already a lot of good things happening, and you guys are moving a lot of things forward in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of craziness. I just think that with more intentionality to do it in a spirit of togetherness, we'd be able to do even more. So the things that I really loved were doing what's best for all 4J students, continuing to learn and grow, respect and care about each other. I mean, that's like at the very top of the list of all the things you guys have brought for the 4J guiding beliefs and values. And I think pretty much everybody on this call who's already spoken or who might be speaking would like can get behind these ideas for what's best for all 4J students, continue to learn and grow, respect and care about each other. And so let me find my place here. I think that out of all of the times, thank you, Lisa, I see 30 seconds. Out of any time, I feel like the time is really now to be able to work together in this spirit of unity, like to really harness what it looks like to hear one another and to find the common ground. And so I will be reaching out to everybody in hopes I might get some FaceTime with you, because I would love to work on this. And for any parents out there listening, please contact me if you have a similar goal, because I think that this will make a really big difference in educating our students and having a good life. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, we have two more speakers that had signed up. Did either of those come?
I do not see either of those speakers in our audience at this time, so we could move on, Madam Chair, if you would like to.
Okay, that sounds good. And we're moving on to the employee groups. And I believe we just have EEA signed up tonight, and we have Jesse Scott.
That is
representing
correct, and
EEA.
Jesse will be coming in shortly.
Okay. And no other employee groups were going to speak tonight, right?
That is correct.
Hi, Jesse. You are on. You can unmute.
Thank
Great.
you. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. Okay. Good evening. My name is Jesse Scott. I'm a 4G teacher, Eugene Education Association member, EEA Racial Equity Director, and most importantly, a parent to 3 4J students. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight as a representative voice of EEA. I want to start by expressing gratitude for last week's board decision to add back teacher planning days. Board members and district and EEA leadership worked together to take meaningful action to relieve teacher workload and allow us necessary time to do our jobs. This sentiment is echoed by colleagues across schools. We want time to do our jobs well, and knowing those dates are coming provides hope. We're drowning with the current demands of our profession. I know this was not an easy decision for you, as you consider all constituents' needs and balance them with what you believe best for our systems and our students. You followed a very short time frame working with educators to identify the most helpful dates. Thank you. It feels good to be heard and acknowledged. Like many 4J parents, I'm still trying to figure out what I will do for my youngest daughter on the new planning days to make sure she gets the care she needs, care she would usually get in her life skills program. Her teachers can't give her the best education she deserves, the instruction and support they are capable of, without the additional planning time to manage all their responsibilities. Too much is being asked of educators and we're overwhelmed. And to be honest, that has been the case for a long time. Despite this reality, it is wonderful to have students in my classroom again, to see their smiling eyes above their masks as we laugh and joke around, building community and showing care for each other. My students are working hard to manage many unseen stressors behind those masks. Masks make it harder to discern their concerns, and the stressors this school year are too much to hide. Students let me know they need help every day. Through their behaviors, they're bigger and more frequent this year, through their tears when they just can't anymore, and through their words when they come to ask for help, tell us they are considering self-harm, or simply that they are lost and not sure where they belong. All of this, the feeling of being overwhelmed, of wanting to do our work well, and not having enough time or resources supporting students as they navigate life, sacrificing our own personal lives and family time to give our work what it deserves, witnessing a dysfunctional and harmful system that disproportionately affects our students of color, our students with special needs, our students with mental health issues, our students without reliable food and housing. All of this is the same it has been in past years and now more. Really, that's what I want to share tonight. On behalf of educators, on behalf of parents, on behalf of our students, our system has been too stretched, too strained for too long. We want a better system, one that is more humane, honors the dignity of both staff and students, and provides time and space for deep engagement. Last year, the impact of COVID and distance learning reminded us we are in a human caring endeavor together. Our eyes were open, we saw what was before us, and we told our community, we see you and we care. Our current education model is not good enough for us. We want better, we need it. It will take work and a significant change to achieve the educational system we all deserve. So let's work together to start planning a better system, one where students can access an education that is fulfilling and nurturing, where students feel cared for, a sustainable school system, where all staff at all levels feel like they have the tools, time, and support to effectively do our job of caring for our children without having to sacrifice our own lives and well-being in the process. Right now, we need triage. That's important and may help us make it to the end of the year with enough teachers and classrooms to care for our students. But what does next year look like? It's time to work together and dream of a better education for our youth and our future. Thank you.
Thank you. It was muted. All right, I think that's all our speakers for tonight. And we're going to move to board comments. Looking for a volunteer to go first. Alicia, thank you.
I won't steal Maya's thunder because she's going to report on the equity committee, but listen to her closely because she has a date certain. We need some items for you. That was my one committee meeting. We met a number of times. I just wanted to say I had a chance to have coffee with Amanda Voss, and it was very helpful. It was very enjoyable, and I hope when she calls you, you will take the time to do that, to remind ourselves about our values and our beliefs and what it looks like on the outside looking in at us as a board. So I appreciate the call. I appreciate the opportunity to have coffee. And so those are the two things I'll report on this week. Thanks.
Thank you, Alicia. Who would like to be next? Great, Maya. I was going to say you were introduced there. So.
Yeah, and plus Alicia didn't take too much time, so maybe I'll eat up some of her time. Board member Alicia, as she mentioned, Hayes and I had the chance to meet with 4J's equity team last week, and we keep getting closer and closer to launching our new equity committee. And we have an exciting list of folks to serve as committee members, but before we take it any further, we want to invite all of the board members to submit names of anyone you would like to have considered. So here's the part to pay attention to. Please send us the names of any students, staff, community members, or parents who you would like us to consider adding to the list. Please include maybe a brief blurb about the person in order to give us an idea as to why you're putting the name forward, and send those to Alicia or myself or Superintendent Vanderkar by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, December 8th. I will follow this up with an email. On Monday, I also attended the listening session held by EEA. Because this was hosted by our licensed staffs union, my statement today is largely focused on licensed staff, but truly the stories, the feelings of being on the edge of breaking are shared by our classified staff as well. So much of what I'm saying tonight applies to our classified staff too. And I would love to have the chance to hear from classified staff directly, because while there is clearly overlap, there are unique aspects to every single job in this district, and each voice deserves its own attention. It was an honor to be entrusted with stories and feedback regarding the on-site experience of teaching in 4J, from kindergarten classrooms through high school, including counselor and TOSA perspectives. I want to thank the licensed staff who participated and made themselves vulnerable in order to paint a very clear and very stark image of what life is like for the folks on the ground in our schools. I have to stop for a moment to emphasize how significant this experience was. It's significant not only because of what we learned, but because of how we learned it. Teachers, school staff in general, are not complainers. This is not a category of people who typically voice their discontent to the public as individuals. It takes a tremendous amount to break a teacher down. Teachers have a stamina that is otherworldly. Teachers put their heads down and get the work done, even when facing extraordinary limitations and burdens. And so I take it as our duty as board members to take the information we received and carry their voices forward, because shouting from the mountaintops to get their needs heard should not be something our teachers should have to add to their very full plates. We can do that for them. The information shared has admittedly left me feeling a level of despair that I cannot shake. And though it's an incredibly uncomfortable feeling, it's a good thing I cannot shake this despair, because it would be too easy to be complicit in not making some profound and necessary decisions in order to boost morale in our schools. And not just boost morale, but to make the work actually doable, with the ultimate goal of making the work sustainable, rewarding, and even exciting. It is clear to me there are two categories of things we must do. However, they are inextricably connected. One category involves tangible things that are easy to identify, though often difficult to implement, like lowering class sizes, thinking deeply about our schedule and making shifts so teachers and students can have more time to literally take care of their bodies as well as their hearts and minds, and the ever elusive, yet always noted, hiring of more staff. The second category is much more conceptual and also much more difficult to tackle. It is a shift in culture. Too many teachers do not feel valued. Too many teachers do not feel heard. Too many teachers do not feel trusted. Too many teachers do not feel wanted. Too many teachers, despite our staffing shortage, feel disposable. If we do not address this component of needs, the tangible things like more planning days and even something as dreamy as lower class sizes will never reach its potential for impact. Our staff deserves to not feel demoralized, and the only people who can impact demoralization is leadership, those of us in decision-making positions. Today, I have many hopes, but there is one that is timely that I will highlight, one that falls in the realm of conceptual and culture shifting. And if this—
Madam Chair, point of order, the speaker's gone on for 4 minutes, and you would ask for a 3-minute time limit.
Thank you. Can you wrap it up in a short period here, Maya? Give you
Sure.
30
That
more.
is so rude.
I agree. I think we're talking about a critical issue here of teacher burnout. That interruption was unnecessary. I'd like to hear the rest of the statement.
Okay, Gordon, let me just, so I will allow you to finish, because I just put that out there tonight so people hadn't thought when they prepared their comments. So I would say going forward, it'd be nice for us to be thinking about a time limit. So Maya, if you could wrap it up in the next, that'd be great.
Sure. So tonight, I have many hopes, but there is one that is timely and I will highlight. And if this falls under the category of bargaining, please know this is coming from me as an independently generated idea, and there is no intention behind my statement to undermine the bargaining process. That said, I would like to see every administrator communicate to every teacher that they trust them to get their work done. That on the days we have designated for planning time, teachers can decide for themselves where they will get the work done, because we know they will get the work done. We know teachers are working beyond contract hours. These volunteer hours they are putting in are proof that teachers get their work done, no matter the cost to them. Let's remind them that we know this and trust them and encourage them to get their planning done wherever they choose, because it is they who know exactly where they do this work best.
Thank you. Great. Who's up next? Martina.
I'll keep it really short tonight. Today is World AIDS Day, and this year also marks 40 years since the first cases of what we now know as HIV. And it's interesting to reflect on 40 years of that global pandemic during the midst of this one. And it's been really interesting today to reflect on how differently the last 40 years would be if the world had responded then to HIV in the way that it's responding now to COVID. I'm thinking of the millions of lives saved. I'm thinking of the millions of children who would not have been orphaned. I'm thinking of a profoundly different world. And so I'm really proud to be part of a district and a community that has been so robust in our responses to protect and prevent amidst this pandemic. And particularly tonight, I just want to extend my thanks to all those who have worked to get vaccines to the children and families who want them, and to hope that as a community, we can continue to support people to make the medical decisions that are best for them and to protect the community around them.
Thank you, Martina. So we have Gordon, Laurel, and Mary left. Mary.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the speakers. There were a couple that I actually am going to call out because I want to take my time tonight to talk about a topic that we have largely ignored, which I think is a gross oversight on our part as the leaders of the district and as the board that is responsible for the total student body of our school district. And I also want to thank the superintendent for bringing this up in her comments. And the topic I'm going to talk about is mental health. And 3 of the speakers tonight talked about mental health. So it's obvious that it's a concern for everyone in the district. And I think we as a board are wasting our time talking about rabbit hole issues, things that are easy to debate and argue about, and we're really missing the big picture, and that is the mental health status of our students. I would like to see us devote more time to that. And as we continue to talk about resources in the coming years and contracts negotiation, that we consciously think about the mental health needs of our students and our staff and how we cover that, how we provide for that. On yesterday, I did attend an OSBA seminar, and it was on that topic on mental health support systems for students. And the webinar was good. It was a lot of information. I would encourage you to check the slides, check out OSBA's website to see a little bit more about it. But it talked about how the system all works together, and the multi-tiered system of support, and how they're all interconnected, and that the point is to blend prevention and response. And 4J was called out as being a model in some of that. But the point, especially at the schools, is the shift in climate and culture towards wellness. And to be a little bit contrary with Mr. Lewin and his comments, I believe there is caring, connection, and community in all of our schools. I volunteer 3 times a week at an elementary school, and I see nothing but caring and connection for those kids. And those kids are some of the most needy kids in the district. So I do believe that's something that all of our employees, whether they be licensed or not, lunch ladies, bus drivers, all take that to heart and practice that every day. In this seminar, we talked about resources, and they suggested a book, and I think in the spirit of learning together and trying to address our shared interests together, we should all try to read it. And it's called What Happened to You? And it's by Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry. And I've read the book, and it's a great book. It talks about trauma-informed care. And I think if we're serious about the mental health of our students, we might, as a group, try to read that and talk about it and make it a priority. I don't think we've done that in the past. The other thing is that the webinar yesterday talked a lot about how the Student Success Act fits with this, because one of the objectives of the Student Success Act and the increase in taxes that the business pay for it was to meet behavior and mental health needs of our students, to increase their academic achievement, and to reduce the disparities for historically underserved populations. So it does dovetail with what we've been doing and what we continue to do. I'm just asking that we make it more of a priority as we move forward. I don't think we have. We've spent a lot of time this year talking about, as I said, things that are rabbit hole issues and that I think are pale and compared to the needs of our students. So I want to see us invest in several things: create positive predictive learning environments, purposeful relationship building, and prioritize teaching of self-regulations and other social emotional skills. Again, I think that's really important. I think, at least in my experiences in the classroom in the elementary schools, that that's something they do focus and practice and mindfulness and so forth. And then what's the difference between when we integrate in a traditional siloed school or across the system? And the study after study has proved that the system across the districts, when it's integrated at the district level is much more successful than individual schools. And we're lucky because we live in a large district and have lots of resources, and we can also call on the Lane ESD to help us out. So again, my appeal is that if we're serious about mental health, let's put our money where our mouth is and really move that forward and spend some time seriously thinking about it and talking about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Gordon.
Thank you. First, quickly, I just want to say the time limits on our speaking are something that we need to agree on in the working agreements. Member Walston just spoke for about 4 minutes, which is fine because we don't have working agreements on that. And I think that means we need to stop interrupting each other or trying to police standards that we haven't agreed on yet. The two things I want to talk about tonight, first is, like other people have talked about, is educator burnout. Our school system, like every school system, has always worked on the knowledge that educators will work far above and beyond the number of hours they're paid for. But this year it's more than ever. We have survey data that approximately 1/4 of our teachers are either actively looking for another job or have their eye on the door and are thinking about looking at opportunities for new jobs. And that we know that about teachers, but we know that classified staff are in similar positions even without survey data. And we have no active plan for figuring out what it is we can do to address these problems. To me, as I've said before, it would make sense that things like improved mentoring, prep time, better coordination between special ed and general ed teachers would all be examples of meaningful things to improve both the quality of education and teachers' ability to do their job professionally, and for it to be meaningful, and for that to counteract the burnout of teaching under COVID. And these are all things that are not like limiting class size to 20 students, which we can't afford to do. But we haven't yet done the surveys of teachers. And in fact, the board so far has resisted committing to doing surveys of teachers to find out which one of these things might actually make a difference in our ability to retain quality teachers. And that's our failing. The district's labor negotiator can only operate within the parameters authorized by the board. I hope that my board colleagues will support doing whatever we can to do right by educators, to ensure that we retain the talented and dedicated people who serve our kids, and to do things like funding the school counselors, school psychologists, and 504 systems to address the mental health needs that Member Walston and Erica Thesson articulated. The second thing I want to touch on is the community benefits agreement issue that we're going to be talking about later in the meeting. The most important factor in educational success is something that is outside any of our control. In 50 years of research, all research consistently shows that the most important thing that determines how well a student does in school is how much money their family has. If they're housed or unhoused, if they're stressed or secure, if they're paid decently or not, if they have health insurance or don't. We all say, of course, that we want research-based and data-driven policy. Here's what the data shows, that how much money your family has a bigger impact than any curriculum choice, than class size, than if you go to a public or private or charter school or anything else that we can do. And normally that's something that is totally outside of our control. But a community benefits agreement gives us a unique opportunity, in at least a very limited way, to do something about this, to increase the number of local families who have decently paid jobs and family health insurance. The proposed agreement that we'll be discussing later tonight will ensure that in building new school buildings, we guarantee to the maximum extent possible that jobs go to local people and that they provide family health insurance to everyone working on the job. And all of this done at no increased expense to the district. The people who build our schools are also parents of students who attend our schools. When we have this extremely rare chance to affect the thing that impacts education more than anything else we'll discuss in our time on our board, I hope that we can do so in the most robust manner possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. So Laurel, you're up.
Hi. As board members, we all attend leadership. I attended last Monday with Judy, Martina, Sydney, Carrie Delph, and Lisa Fjordbeck. It is beautiful that Ruby Bridges reminds you that equity work is an adult job. It is equally vital that you understand how it looks. When I just had to sit through a meeting with 5 white women who spent a significant amount of time talking about how they need to understand when they need to actually formally use the equity tool. It's not about formal use, it's about consistent use of the tool. When Judy asked Sydney about her use of the tool, the first thing Sydney said was that using the lens is a lot of work. She said She said it was a 3,000 word paper and how it didn't help the kids. That she learned to look who she believed was not being heard is an integral part of the tool. I'm going to repeat this, that this means the tool is working. It isn't what she, excuse me, that isn't what, because that isn't what she saw right away. It shows that our training is absolutely necessary for understanding. I was told during this meeting that staff just regularly embeds equity into their decision making, and the fact that staff and admin do not. The fact is, sorry, I can't even read my own stuff, that they don't regularly add it into their decision making and judgment making. That's why we need this, because things get missed. Do I mean, are they bad people? No, it gets missed. Further training will help with this understanding. This tool will need to be used. We voted to use it, not to use it when it arbitrarily feels right. That discussion on equity was a great example of white privilege. Most everything that was said was in reference to an explanation about how not to use the tool. As adults, please step away from your privilege and try harder not to trample on the Black people who work with you. Sydney could have informed you that Larry and Marcel are very busy people when Martina stated that we want to make sure that Larry and Marcel, sorry if I butchered your name, Marcel, get to lead their department. Equity and the equity lens is for everyone, not for us to wait for staff to do the work. We must all do the work. As the board, it is our job to expect and apply the equity tool to our decision-making. Having all these opinions without the training is problematic and scary, and ultimately demonstrates how necessary this equity tool is. You just proved without a doubt that you do not give equity work the gravitas it deserves. Judy, I heard you when you said we could discuss adding Alma's equity training to the board calendar, but I don't think that can happen if it's not part of the contract. And if the contract isn't finished, how will we add it? Does the board approve that contract? I'm here for the people who elected me. I'm here for the number of kids and staff who fall into equity groups and are regularly ignored at 4J unless they are in, excuse me, trouble. I don't want this equity tool to be a performative nod. I do not want it to be hogtied into meaninglessness. It will be used, and that is what we voted on, and that is what we will do. And anything else is undermining a board decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Can I just ask a clarifying question? Were you thinking it should be in the contract with the teachers we're negotiating, or with the superintendent?
Alma. I was talking about Alma.
Oh, okay. No, that's
that they had do a lot of equity training, and I'm like, we can't. If it's not part of their contract, we can't just tell them to do it.
Well, they'll be trained. They'll be doing the training involved with the superintendent search, and we could have that conversation for other future things too. So yeah, I think some of their already in that what they give to us will be some training. Okay, so we're going to move along to the consent group. We have one item on the consent agenda tonight. Is there a motion? Mary.
I would like to pull the minutes of October 27th from the consent calendar to offer revision.
Okay. Do we just pull them, or we have to vote on that?
No, I can pull them, and then you can approve the rest of the items if you want, and then come back and I can explain my revision.
Well, there is only one thing on the consent calendar, so.
Well, there's the October 13th minutes and the November 23rd.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And then I want to pull the 27th.
Let's have a motion for those two sets of minutes, please.
All right, and Mary, please correct me if I got the dates that you were wanting to pull, or the date that you were wanting to pull wrong. So I move approval of the minutes from the October 13th and November 23rd. Did I get that correct? Okay, and the November 23rd special board meetings.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Martina moves and Mary seconds that the 2 minutes on the consent item that remain be approved. All those in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? It passes unanimously with a 7-0 vote. Okay, Mary, what's a correction?
And I will forward this on to you and the board clerk because you don't have to write it all down here. So it's on packet page 12, minutes page 6, the 6th full paragraph, the last sentence that begins, Ms. Walston. The paragraph starts with Chair Newman summarized that there was, and then, but what I want to change is the very last sentence in that paragraph, because what was written is the exact opposite of what I said. Okay, and so here's what I would like to strike that sentence and replace it with, Walston expressed concern that other board members had suggested that Dr. Balderas, the past superintendent, had a conflict of interest in being part of the McPherson team. She said the fact that Dr. Balderas was the Oregon Superintendent of the Year and the National Superintendent of the Year were large pluses for her in the consideration of the response for the McPherson proposal.
Okay, so can we make that correction and then do a motion with the correction?
If if my correction is acceptable, then we can go ahead and approve the minutes as amended.
I remember her saying that exactly the way she just said it. So
great. So you're.
I don't know. Can we vote on it now? Because I do remember her mentioning that.
Great.
We can do it right now.
I think we can, unless someone has wants to say that they don't agree with it, and then I think we'll see it in writing. It'll come out next time. So should we have a motion with the correction?
Does Mary do the motion and then somebody can second it?
I think Martina will probably do the motion. Yeah.
I'll do my best. This is the first.
Okay, well, maybe Mary, do you want to read it then?
I wrote it down. You want me to read it one more time?
No, go ahead and read it and we will then, Martina could second it. Yeah.
Okay, then I move, I'll just make it easy. I move that we strike the last sentence of that paragraph I mentioned earlier, page 6, and replace it with Ms. Walston expressed concern that the other board members had suggested that Dr. Balderas, the past superintendent, had a conflict of interest in being part of the McPherson team. She said the fact that Dr. Balderas was Oregon Superintendent of the Year and National Superintendent of the Year were large pluses for her in the consideration of response from the McPherson proposal. And I will email this to you. So,
great.
So am I seconding that or am I making that motion? I'm so sorry.
I made the motion because I already
okay. Then I second it so well.
Okay, all those in favor of passing the minutes with that correction, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed, same sign. The motion passes 7-0. Okay.
Thank you for that consideration.
Okay, now we're on to items for information, and the first item is to receive the fiscal year 22 first quarter financial report from Andrea Belz. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm going to go through the reports and just kind of highlight some of the items that I'd like you to consider as we look at these, and then leave a little bit of time for questions in case anything comes up. So looking at the first report in your packet, which is the general fund budget forecast and expenditures as of September 30, 2021, you'll notice that, it's the beginning of the year. Most of our revenues have not come in yet, but we do have 35% of our state school fund through the door. Something to know if you're new to this funding source is that we receive 12 payments from the state school fund, but we do not receive them evenly throughout the year. We receive a double state school fund payment in July, and we do not receive a payment in June. So seeing here, it looks like we've gotten quite a bit of our state school fund, more than you would expect, but that is because of the double payment in July. Looking at our expenditures, we are definitely on track. You'll notice that the last item, other accounts, is at 88%, which may seem unusual, but this is the line item where we record our payment for our insurance. And that payment is made at the beginning of the year. So this line item will always be significantly expended as of the first quarter with those July payments. We have not yet committed any of our contingency. We have committed some of our staffing pool, and that will be communicated to you as part of an upcoming supplemental budget. We usually wait to put those out until we have an end to negotiations so that we can put everything into one document to bring to you so you can see all of our progress. Looking forward to our appropriations limitation as of September 30th, you'll see that we do not have any negatives in the remaining authority column. That's where you want to take a look to see if anything looks like we have overspent, and we have not. And that's what we keep track of, because of course we cannot have negative amounts there. We need to make sure we get to the board if that is happening, to explain to you why our actual spending has deviated from our adopted budget and what needs to happen to correct that. And finally, you have the nutrition services first quarter status report. I'm happy to report that as of the first quarter that they're in the black. That's always a great thing. They do such a great job making sure that all of our kids, whether they are in school right now or whether they are working with us through our remote options like Eugene Online Academy or K5 Connect, that all of our kids are getting great meals and we're supporting them in every way we can. So I think that they do an awesome job, and they are doing that while also staying in the black. So any questions that I could answer for anyone?
Alicia, was that your hand? Great, Alicia.
Yes, because I'm old school and I don't put that little pretend hand up. No, I just want to say, so exciting to see, particularly about nutrition services, because when we made that decision to move that in-house, one of the issues was worrying about the funding and the finances of it. So thank you, and really just thank you to all the people who are making that work. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you.
Mary.
This is just another shout out thank you to the nutrition services, because I agree that we made that decision to go in-house with a little bit of hesitancy. I was one of the ones that wasn't initially convinced on it, but the volunteer job I'm doing is serving lunches, and today it was mac and cheese, and they do a great job. It's just amazing, the nutrition services. And so kudos to them. And I'm glad we're within our budget.
Laurel, you had your hand up next. You're muted.
I unmuted myself. I noticed in the paperwork that was given to us that there was funding to pay off all past due for school lunches and stuff. And I don't know when this happened. I know it was obviously before I got here, but I just wanted to say, yes, great, wonderful, because I've had a kid that was been given the cheese sandwich before in front of everybody, and it's not, it doesn't feel good to kids. So I like that we're doing that, and I hope we can continue that. And if there's any way to have that discussion at another time about how we can keep funding that so we don't have those problems, I would love that to be part of our discussion as the board, and because we do budget. So thank you that work was already done is mostly what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Laurel. Mary. Oh, was your hand? No, okay. Any other questions for Andrea? I just want to thank you, Andrea. There's so many funding sources, and I'm just so impressed with you and your staff and how you keep this on target. And I am also excited about the nutrition. So thank you.
Thank you very much. My staff work really hard, like everybody else out there, because it comes down to the why, and that's the kids. We want to make sure that the money's there to take care of them.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item for information is including student voice in future board meetings. And I am going to just talk about that. And in your packet, well, the first thing I want to say is it is on the agenda for information, but we're hoping to put it on for item for action at our next meeting so we can start implementing this right after break. Since December 15th is our next meeting, and our last meeting before January. So it would be good to have a plan to go forward for this year because half the year's over. So if you recall, at our last meeting, we had a work session, and we were led by Larry and Misael about some ideas about student voice and some suggestions that we take some of those ideas and come up with a proposal. And at the end of the work session, I said I would try to take what they gave input on, look through what might be realistic for this year and make a proposal to the board, which is what I put in the packet. And so I just want to walk through that and my thinking about that briefly. And then we all agreed to do the equity lens on this proposal. And I'd like to have a conversation about that, an idea. So we propose to integrate the students now, just to give a context, the students have already been selected from all the high schools to be student representatives on the board. And each high school selects their students differently, which I know we want to dig in more deeply about. But the students are expecting to be on the board this year. So I'm suggesting that we begin them in January. We do an orientation probably in a work session before our first meeting, and talk about the kinds of comments we want to hear, the kinds of input we'd like to have, and really give them some direction. And we want to, balance that between what they are seeing and think is important to tell the board and the community about from their high school, and also asking them maybe some other questions about getting input from others. So that would be up to us orienting the students. And we also have the opportunity to, if we're considering something on the agenda, Laura, I'll call you in a second, okay? If we're considering something on our agenda, that we can ask them for specific input on agenda items at meetings. And the other part of the proposal is that we know the affinity group leaders, they're going to be meeting. And we propose to have 1 to 2 work sessions with, as Larry and Misael presented to us, where they would work with students and the leaders would have the students come to a work session with us so we could have a conversation and have them present to us what's important. And then looking ahead to next year, if we want to make bigger changes like us, we can consider a student advisory group, district-wide, or whatever. More, it can be different. Laurel.
Yeah, I'm really confused. You're presenting like a decision was made last time of what's going to happen, and we didn't make a decision. We just had a conversation. And so the proposals you're putting forward are not, we're supposed to be making that decision about what we're going to be doing.
That's right.
And my understanding from what the conversation that happened was, it wasn't maybe we talked to affinity groups one time, it was they would be coming to board meetings. And so I'm listening to this with a lot of dismay, because it sounds like you're presenting this as that if this is the way this is going to go, and that is not at all what was presented to us in the work session.
So Laurel, that we can't, we're having a conversation for information. We have nothing on the agenda to make a decision tonight. So I want to reassure you about that. My task was to because we didn't really have a proposal to respond to. So this is a proposal, an actual proposal to react to, about how we could move forward for this year. So it could look really different when we end up voting on it. So that's all.
Except it says what you just said is what you have down for description and discussion is what you just said, but that, to me, I think the discussion was how and what and the amount of time, not presenting us 1 to 2 sessions with affinity groups, which is a big change from what was presented to us. It's pretty much squashing the voice of the affinity groups as opposed to what was presented to us was, please make a decision about how using the equity lens to have affinity groups as part of board meetings. And now what I'm hearing is something completely different. And it is being proposed very differently. It is in my board packet very differently. I just would like us to be very careful about not, like, this is first part in this meeting, you're saying the only place where we can all talk together and saying, don't talk too much. And then we're getting things presented to us as almost complete that aren't accurate. What's written is not accurate. That is not the proposal that was given to us, and that wasn't the work we were supposed to do. And I just want to make that very well known. And it's important that we take what is given to us and not turn it into something else before we get back to the board meeting, because that means there's an agenda.
Laurel, I just want to respond by saying what they gave to us was some ideas, and I took those ideas and made a proposal. We can throw that proposal out. It sounds like you would like to have a different conversation, and I see hands up. I don't know who was first, but I'll just go from right to left. Alicia, and then Mary, and then Maya.
I'm already off mute. So I remember, Laurel and I kind of having a conversation that was, kind of stuck with me about that first question on the equity lens. And I think that's where you're headed, Laurel. It certainly triggered my memory of that, which is that question of why, and I kind of struggle with that when I looked at my thinking and proposal is like, why are we doing this? And then that helps me make the decision about now what's the structure. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. Anyway, that's where I had a little, like, I don't know if we as a board answered that question. I know we all went off and kind of answered it for ourselves, but anyway, just something to think about, like a starting point. What's our goal with this? And maybe this is a good one to, slow down and really try to use this tool that we haven't really gotten comfortable with. Because anyway, my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you. Mary.
Actually, Maya was first, so she can go ahead.
Okay, Maya, sorry.
No worries. So I'm just gonna give feedback on the proposal as it stands and try to link it into how I worked it through with the equity lens, with a particular focus on the 4 questions that Misael and Larry highlighted. I'm just going to jump into the outcomes component of it and work back from there. I'm a little bit concerned, or I'm a lot bit concerned that this negatively impacts equity the way that it's been proposed tonight. Because affinity groups are limited in their opportunity to interact with and inform the board. It decreases their learning opportunity and it compromises their voice. I feel like 1 to 2 work sessions is way too little, as it deprioritizes their voice in comparison with the traditionally selected, for the majority. I know some schools did it a little differently, board reps. So the first point for me is that I would like to hear more from affinity groups, and I appreciated that Larry and Misael, I think that's when Larry said that we meet 9 times, which we all laughed at, but because we meet more. And it doesn't have to be every single time we meet, but I would definitely like more than 1 to 2 work sessions. And I would like, if they would like the opportunity to interact in a formal board meeting, for them to have that as a learning opportunity. I would also, for now, I would scratch the advisory committee concept. I think that it's a very compelling component of the proposal. I just think that doing more isn't always better. And I would really like to make sure that what we are doing is done as well as possible. So I would like to take the time that we would have been putting into the advisory committee into really diving deep into how we can reimagine the selection of the board reps that we have traditionally had, and just figuring out how we can not only reimagine the selection, but also how they participate, and do that as our deep dive for this year, for next, and consider the advisory committee as something maybe for the year after. And in that vein, I also, in terms of the inclusion, who will be impacted and are they being included in the process, for any of the future development of student input, I would like the students themselves to be involved in that. And we have the opportunity with affinity groups to bring them into that process. And also, I know that you noted it in the board packet, but in our equity committee meeting, we got a little bit excited talking about how the student members of the equity committee could bring forward equity committee work to the board. And I would like to have that be maybe the collection of students alongside the affinity group and the board reps who imagine what a student advisory committee looks like. I have my very adult-centered vision of that, but I would like to hear it directly from the students. So just to summarize, I'd like more time with affinity groups. I would like to table or parking lot, or whatever the term is, the concept of the advisory committee. And I would like to really focus on fine tuning the components that we have in place.
Thank you. Mary.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning. I think, Judy, I want to appreciate the fact that you took the discussion we had, was it 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and put forth a proposal, because I remember at that session we go, well, you know, what are we doing here? And it was like, we had a blank canvas, and we frankly didn't know what we were doing, I think, you know, which, no, but I'm not blaming any. I think there was just sort of I thought you were doing it, no, I thought you were doing it, with regard to, you know, where we go from here. So I appreciate the fact you took those ideas and tried to craft a proposal, and it's a proposal, so we can add to it and delete to it. That's why we're having this discussion. But I would also say that, you know, if you think in practical terms, we've got 5, I will say traditional, for lack of a better word, student representatives from all the high schools. And then if we're going to add 5 affinity groups, that's 10 people. And I heard Maya say, well, we're going to have them all at a board meeting. So how are we going to have 10 extra bodies taking time to speak in what is our business meeting, like approving consent calendars, budget, and so forth? And so, and plus they go on, and I know that the students sometimes leave. So I think I like the idea of the way we've done it in the past, and they've done what we've asked them to do, but we've always said, you know, here's some ideas to change your reports. And they actually were moving towards that the last year when we didn't have the pandemic. And then with the affinity groups, if 1 or 2 times isn't enough, then we can have a work session every month. But I think that's a different format, because it's a different conversation. You want them to, you know, really interact with us, and we should have it like in the par room where we can sit at the same table, look at each other, not where we're up on the dais in a formal meeting, which is intimidating for us, let alone, you know, high school students. So I like the kind of 2-tiered approach where we have the traditional, for lack of a better word, student reps that come and talk about, you know, what's going on, and you know, they always talk about fundraisers, which is really helpful. And then we have affinity groups, and we really have this, you know, what's the climate of the school, what's important to you, and we sit and we turn off our mouths and use both of our ears more often and really listen to what they have to say. And then the other question is, you know, we talk about we want more authentic voice. Well, you know, are you telling me that the voices we had in the past, like Judy, you had Hannah from North Eugene, and you know, she was wonderful. She told you what she thought, you know, and you know, so I bristle at the fact that, you know, we want more authentic, because that seems like you're saying she's not authentic. And I know all the students I had, I can name them all, I always thought they were really authentic. So I like the 2-tiered approach, but I want us to, you know, think about how we're going to actually execute it. And is there going to be an agenda for the affinity groups? I think there should be, not just a, you know, let's just sit and look at each other for a couple hours. We might even want to think about having it being a facilitated conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? Martina.
So I guess I'll just jump in and say that, I left the last meeting under the impression that leadership was being asked to try to synthesize some of the discussion that we had and bring forward a proposal for the board to discuss and workshop, not a final draft of anything, but some ideas, which is what I thought this was. And part of what Judy and I talked about as we sort of reviewed what had been discussed and as we thought about what could be useful moving forward is, really trying to find a way to balance, there's students who have already been selected for this past year, and that's, we felt bad not honoring the sort of expectation they had. So trying to figure out how to include them in some ways. And also trying to figure out how we could really think of this year as sort of a developmental year moving forward, because, one of the really big challenges about including young folks in and having their voice included on the board is that, we need to figure out how we can actually include their voice in a way that that is functional for them as well as useful for us. And one of the things that we all talked about in our work session 2 weeks ago was wanting to make sure that we were hearing from them in a way where they could actually participate and actually share with us things that they thought was important. And we weren't sure if that was always, if being a representative on the dais and having 3 minutes to give a report, and then, often many of them have to leave because it's not a convenient time for young folks, whether or not that was the most productive space for them to be communicating with us. And so, part of what we were hoping we could talk about tonight is how we could maybe connect and workshop for this year as a sort of interim space, what would be more functional. They may say to us that, yes, the 3-minute report from the dais is the best possible way, and then we should move forward with that. They may also say, that doesn't feel like a really great space. I'd like to, I don't know, like Mary was saying, discuss in the par room. Or maybe they want to have discussions and then send a representative to talk to us. Like we don't really know. And so we were kind of thinking in part that some of these, work sessions and thinking towards, what we had been calling between the two of us an advisory group, but doesn't have to be that, could help us sort of build towards that using their expertise and really hearing from them how they wanted to participate. Much of my career has been working in youth development and youth leadership, and often we see groups of folks want to include youth voice and say, well, we got to get the kids to come to the meetings. But, for example, in many of the work groups I participated in professionally, those meetings might be 8 a.m. one morning a month, and that may not be the best time for young folks. So we wanted to have a chance to really talk with the students about how they could participate in a way that was meaningful and rich for them, and that met them where they're at. So that was really the intention behind some of the ideas in this proposal, which really was meant to be a jumping off point for discussion and not at all a solidified plan that we were asking people to immediately vote on.
Other comments? I have a suggestion at this point. I like what, and this might address some of your concerns, Laurel, and Alicia's suggestion. Maybe we could just go around. I know we all looked at the equity lens and just could share what the purpose, what we're trying to do with having student voice. I'm happy to start why people are thinking. When I looked at this, I said, my purpose is to increase student voice, perspective, and experience in decisions that affects them. The proposal takes a step to expand the extent and depth of input from a diverse group of students. The board will get input on specific topics and decisions and hear from students about what they think is important for the board and leadership to understand and address. So I was looking at this as a step to getting broader input, knowing that by next year, we want time to be thoughtful to get even broader voice. So does anyone else want to talk about what their purpose is? Laurel.
I will mention my purpose. I would also like to say, I think using the equity lens, who's missing from this conversation and the decision-making right now is student voice. Like right now, like we should be having some clarity around, because we keep on saying and inferring what they would say, but one thing I know as a mother of teens, I'm usually wrong. At least that's what they tell me. Always. Anyway, for my purpose, I said it's to hear from a wider different demographic of students, to give voice to students that the board doesn't many times doesn't have space for because time constraints and such. I also want to add what the proposal from, it wasn't proposal, not using official language so nobody gets mad, but what Misael and Larry were saying is, at this point, it's important that you really look at who has the time from the students to come and talk. So I think it's very important, more important than feelings and such, because right now, with everything that happened last year, as far as COVID, as far as all the BLM protests, as far as the work that is going on that is really important in the trans community, all these things that are happening in our community are happening now. So, well, it feels good to say, you know what, let's put a bow on this and do it next year. The reality is we're talking about kids that will be graduated by next year and such, and who have a voice now and want to really be part of this. So I want to really point out, the point of this was to look at who comes and talks to the board, and not to keep it like, well, yes, those people already have permission to do it, and now we'll make some space for more people. It's really the point to change how the system is working. That's what I got from what they were telling us and showing us. And when I asked that question, that's what they confirmed at that time.
Thank you. Gordon.
Thank you. I wasn't at the last work session, so I can't comment about that. I would just say, for what I would be interested in is not just hearing more voices, but hearing students talk about the things that they think could be improved and that they would like to see changed. Because I greatly appreciate the student representatives we've had, but they overwhelmingly gave us a kind of slice of life of what was happening at the school with, fundraisers or homecoming or other kinds of things like that. That was good to know, but I felt like students have been encouraged to believe that that's their role, is to report on things like that. And I know, we all hear from plenty of people, plenty of things that students want to see different. And I think that they've been encouraged to think that that's not what they're supposed to tell the board, and or that they don't have the power or the authority to really come to the board or to the district as a place where they could actually articulate, here's a thing we want to be working differently, that we think should be differently. So you can't put words in anybody's mouth, but I'd be interested in a process that encourages the openness to have that kind of stuff articulated.
Thank you. Maya has her hand up.
I have to be honest that I can't remember if you wanted us to go through all of the questions or just the purpose part, but I'll focus on purpose because I think that's what you wanted. So for me, I'm not going to repeat what I've heard already, but I did hear a lot of what you were saying, particularly Judy, that resonated with what I have written down. But the things that I didn't necessarily hear, and I apologize if I overlooked them. I'm not trying to imply nobody else feels this way, but I also think the purpose is to also empower students by honoring them as experts. I think it is also to enrich our decision-making process by having it genuinely informed by student voice. I think it's also about facilitating a space for students to inform the public and to not tokenize their voices. So for me, the not tokenizing their voices is maybe the highest priority in terms of what I want to see happen in involving the student voice, and not making it just be a superficial thing that we add to our process. I also think that it's important in terms of that goal, or the what are we trying to do, to recognize that we are very interactive during our work sessions for sure, but the community is mostly tuned into our board meetings. And when we interact with staff, for example, we do more back and forth, or we have when staff was attending regularly. And I would like to make that kind of structure be available to the students so that we could avoid the 3-minute public comment, very cold response, no response type of thing that we that would be completely inappropriate if we're not tokenizing their voices.
Thank you. Alicia.
Thanks, Judy. Well, I appreciated that we did use the equity tool because, you know, I challenged myself, and some of you have already said it was like, oh, we do this because we make really important decisions and we want to make sure we hear from students. And then of course you have to say, wait, we don't even know the decisions we should be making because we haven't heard from students. So appreciate that we get a chance to kind of slow down and ponder the best way to move forward. I think that Maya and I've had a little bit of opportunity to talk about this with the staff and with the superintendent in our equity huddles. One of the things that is clear to me is that this year is a bridge, and that we have, you know, I don't know if Martina, maybe you were the one that brought it up, that talked about make sure they're at the table when we're I'll give all of you credit for it, but that the student voice is at the table where we're making decisions about how we hear student voice. But first, you know, it's kind of like, we got to get started on that. So I thought some of the work that staff did and gave us some options, and Judy and Martina gave us options, that we just need to know this is a work in progress and we need to keep challenging ourselves. So I'm not sure where we go or when we get this thing started, but I do appreciate that. It would be nice to have something in place by the first of the year, because I have missed, I've missed hearing about the dances, but I've also missed just having the students here. And, you know, selfishly, it reminds me why I come to these meetings. And so that's very helpful. So I don't know how we want to move forward to make sure everybody's voice is in the room and people feel comfortable with this next step that isn't the final step. But if we can figure that out tonight, it would be helpful. Thanks, Judy. Thanks.
I think we could give this item, unfortunately, we have a whole agenda and we've already spent a lot of time. So I am open for a path. Maybe the first thing is, are we okay with having a bridge year and doing something not our dream, but something to get students' voice at the table? Maybe that's my first question. Maya.
Can you just elaborate what that, like, I know you don't have the specifics worked out, but what do you mean when you say not our dream and just bridge year? I just want to understand. Well, I have my vision of that, but I don't know if it aligns with yours.
Well, I think I had made the proposal as a bridge year. And what I'm hearing now from the group, though, is there wasn't enough input from the affinity group leaders. So we'd want to expand that and invite the students that we have already identified from the high schools to the table. And then I was going to suggest we have a subgroup of the committee that's really interested in this, that maybe works on an orientation in a way to start working with students to get authentic voice, working with Miss Ayel and Larry, who will work with the affinity leaders of how to have those conversations in a meaningful way. And we can be asking them, you know, so that's what I'm thinking as the bridge year. But I'm open to other ideas. Alicia.
One thing I like about that is that, you know, sometimes we want to get things done quickly and we set the, you know, this is the path. But gosh, if one of our first questions to the affinity group is, how would you like to meet with the board and how often would you like to meet with the board this year? We could actually have student voice in that. And I know that's going to change. Because they're going to get to know us or get to see the system, and hopefully they'll want to meet more because it works. It's when they're going to say, we don't need to meet with them, that makes me nervous. So I'd be fine with that. But were you suggesting, Judy, a subcommittee of the board kind of would take and run with this and tweak this proposal? You know, we play with the proposal or bring something back more, or what exactly would the small committee do? That's my question.
I think they would put a little more meat on the bones of the proposal, yes, and including how, I mean, it didn't go into depth of how we were going to work with students to orient them to get information, how they're going to be talking with the board, to have them bring up issues and also respond to things that we bring up. Just the whole process really is still not formed. Laurel.
I want students to be more involved in this. This is their voice. This is who they are. And it seems like we think of affinity groups and the student leaders is completely separate, which in fact, they can have a discussion at their school about who they would like to represent from their school for this year. I think that is kind of an in-between, and we discuss more about how we change it, but they among each other should be talking anyway.
Yeah.
And so instead of just saying these students get to come talk to us, they all talk to among each other, and they're great at doing this and figuring out whose voice they want to celebrate and push up and have as who's good at doing this work. And it could be the student leaders, but it could also be somebody else from one of the other affinity groups. My proposal is that we go back to the students to find out, to get their input. Because when I look at the equity lens, which we haven't finished talking about it at all, that voice is not here. It's just us. It's a bunch of middle-aged adults talking about what we want to hear from students, and I want to hear what they think. And I bet they're going to knock our socks off, because that's how old people talk. We say knock socks off and stuff like that.
Just to clarify, the schools have all selected representatives for this year already. So we'd have to go back and tell them to unselect, and each one does it differently, Laurel. And that's something we wanted to talk with them about, how to do that.
They've done it because that's what they do every year, correct?
Yeah, but they've been selected real people.
Yes, and I'm proposing that we go back to the students. We don't have to do what I just proposed, but we go back and get ideas from the students how to do this. And I would love it if we stop thinking in terms of affinity groups. Like, they can be the voice from the school. It can happen that way. They can pick somebody from the affinity, and in some cases, I'm guessing there may be crossover.
Yes.
So,
Mary.
Well, I think I'm very much aware the schools have already picked their representatives. I don't think we can go back and say, oh, just kidding, we don't want you now. And I don't think we as board members should be dictating to the schools too much what they do. We can say, this is what we expect of the student you select or the student you bring forth, but I don't think we should dictate their process. I don't think that's our role, and I think it fringes on academic freedom. And then, I know, at least my experience with the Churchill students, who've all been super, I won't go on about that, but they work with their principal, they work with the counselors, so they know what's going on in the school, and they know what they want to bring forward. And I do believe that they work, with students there and survey them to know what's going on. So if we want to have student voice, why don't we get those students on the board and ask them what they think to get, first step in the student voice, because we know who they are already and they're selected, and let's get them on. Because like Alicia, I miss them. I miss talking with them and hanging out with them, and they always have a really good perspective. So I hope we can get those students on board, no pun intended, as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. So do I have some volunteers who would like to take this and rework it, or come back with a proposal for this year that isn't everything we want? I have Maya and I have, are you volunteering or you want to speak? You two, okay. Laurel and Maya are volunteering. Anyone else want to work with them? Leisha? Was that to speak or volunteer?
No, it's to say, I think there'll be a party good time. We'll get this taken care of. So,
Okay.
yeah, it'll be virtual though, right, guys? No, we'll meet.
Okay.
I'm up for it. Thank you, Judy.
Yes,
Great,
Alicia,
okay.
we know you're not going to be around.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
So Maya, Laurel, and Alicia, thank you for volunteering, and we will see this proposal come back to us.
Can we get a convener between the three of us before we leave? Will one of you guys offer to convene, Maya or Laurel? Ding, ding, ding. That means you just work with Lisa to get that, or you check with us. You're gonna do it, Maya?
I
Maya's
will
done.
volunteer. Okay.
Maya.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. We're going to move on then. Thank you for volunteering, and we'll see what our next iteration will be. So now we're moving into items for action. And the first one is voting on the Oregon School Boards Association representatives that are, we choose one of the representatives for the OSBA board, and then one for leadership board, and one for the policy committee, legislative policy committee. Mary. You're muted.
I would like to make a motion that the board consider Linda Hamilton as the representative from the Lane region to the OSBA board. And then I don't know if we need to vote on these separately, but that we also consider Judy Newman as our representative on the legislative policy committee. We may have to separate those votes, but that's I can make two separate motions, Chair, if you'd like me to do that.
Probably we should do them separately.
Okay. I move that we I'm nominating Linda Hamilton as our person to vote for OSBA Lane region representative.
So Mary has nominated. I see Laurel seconding the nomination for Linda Hamilton for a representative. Any discussion? Martina.
I'll just say that I'm very glad that I get to vote to nominate Linda again, and have really appreciated her leadership, and just wanted to make sure that as we're going through this quickly, that we get a chance to just appreciate her for her hard work.
Yeah. Thank you. I second that. So I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of Linda Hamilton being the representative to the board, OSBA board, raise your hand and say aye.
That we vote for.
That we vote for, that our, yes, that our district votes for. Thank you. Okay, anyone opposed, same sign. Okay, the motion passes unanimously 7-1. Yay, Linda.
7-1, it's unanimous?
7-0.
Okay, thank you. And if you're ready, Chair, I will make the motion for the legislative policy unless the vice chair would like to make it.
Well, I had it prepared, but Mary,
Right.
you're welcome to.
Go ahead.
Okay, in that case, I move that the board cast its vote in the OSBA annual election for OSBA Legislative Policy Committee Position 6 for Judy Newman.
Second.
Okay, all those, any discussion on that?
Well,
Maya.
in all fairness, if we're going to honor Linda Hamilton and all the work that she's done, I think that we should take a moment to say thank you to Judy as well.
Thank you, Maya. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, so that passes unanimously 7-0. And so we will be voting for Judy Newman, me, for the Legislative Policy Group. Thank you. And I will just say aside, I know Austin, the other person from our region, is really excellent. I know he's new on the LCC board, and I'm going to be talking in my position on the legislature, if I get elected by the other districts, to make sure we have, I think there should be separate representation for community colleges and K-12, you know, that we need to be sure that's happening. So I will definitely be raising that. I just wanted to let you all know. Okay. Thank you. Now we are moving on to approving the resolution of the complaint that we had. And so the board policy KL, the background is we have a board policy KL and implementing a regulation KLAR, and it describes our process if anyone wants to refer to that. It's on our website for resolving complaints made by members of the public. On October 13th, 2021, the board reviewed and considered such a complaint in an executive session on October 13th, 2021, held pursuant to ORS 192.6602B. And can I get a motion from the board? I think Gordon's got his hand up. Thank you.
Thanks. I move that the board find that the evidence does not substantiate the complaint and that the complainant be notified of this decision within the timelines provided by policy KLAR.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Maya. So Gordon's moved and Maya has seconded. Any discussion? No discussion, then I will call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as Gordon presented it, to please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. The motion passes unanimously 7-0. Thank you. All right, now we are moving on to items for action for at a future meeting. And the first item up is a community resolution 2022-10 authorizing community benefits contracts. And we have Christine Nesbitt, our general counsel, and Carol Napple, Capital Improvement Project Manager, and Ryan Spain, Director of Facilities, to talk about that item. Thank you.
Good evening, board members. And on behalf of our team, I've agreed to give the initial presentation. And I'm sure if you have questions that Carol and Ryan will be weighing in on those, because they know a lot about construction and project management. So, but just to give you a framework around this, you know, the overall purpose of the resolution that you are considering is to authorize the district on a trial basis to use a community benefits contract on a portion of the Camas Ridge build. Using this type of agreement is one of the ways that the board can achieve policy outcomes. And it's necessary for the board to approve this resolution in order for the district to declare any of the contracts that it has as community benefits contracts. There has been some board discussion about this in the past on a couple of prior occasions, which are noted in the board materials. And based on those conversations, including last, I think it was June, staff understood that the policy goals were to promote employer-paid family medical insurance benefits, opportunities for women, minority, individual, and disabled veterans, as well as businesses owned by the same to perform project work. And to increase participation by apprentices in project work, or to promote it, and to promote paying at or above prevailing wage. Since last June, when we last spoke about this subject, the legislature actually passed legislation that expressly permits public entities to use public community benefit contracts. The legislation is included in your board pack, as is the fiscal impact statement. And it, in a nutshell, a community benefits contract is simply a public improvement contract that includes contract elements. Hang on a second. contract elements that are in addition to those that are in other public improvement contracts. Sorry about that. Examples of terms would include things like the use of apprenticeship training or employer paid health insurance. The context around this, I think, is really important, and that is that the district hasn't used one of these before. We haven't used a community benefits pre-qualification process, although we previously talked about it. And similar to the approach taken by Lane County, staff believe it's really critical to have an opportunity to develop procedures for using the community benefits project and probably pre-qualification bidding procedures on a pilot basis and at a manageable pace. And another element that to be aware of is that we have a contract with our general construction manager for the Camas Ridge rebuild. And project estimates were made long before this discussion about using a community benefits agreement. And we're expecting contracts to and RFPs to be going out in spring 2022. And so it's important to approach this with some care so that those are not delayed. Delays are really, really problematic from a financial perspective because construction costs have really escalated so much over the years beyond project expectations initially conceived a few years ago. Another piece to be aware of just in terms of context is that with the passage of the law, the Oregon Department of Transportation is now convening a large group of stakeholders to refine procedures in this area. And so it's really staff's thought is to take their best work, the work that we believe has been done at Lane County and that we'd like to try here and improve, taking all of that together, use our model, learn what we can, learn over the next year and a half about from ODOT and what is developed there, and develop a best practices approach. The recommendation, after conferring with the general contractor, staff identified a subset of contracts for the Camas Ridge project that they believe would be suitable for achieving the policy goals of the board. And they've identified 5 tier 1 contracts that would be suitable. Those would be electrical, plumbing, mechanical, fire sprinklers, framing, drywall, and ceiling systems. I may be saying that in a not quite right way. I know one of those trades may be just one trade. But so in terms of the resolution itself, it recites the law and the legal background and some prior work on this. And it includes the stipulation that a contractor would provide employer paid family health care benefits. That's intended to be fully paid employer family, fully paid by the employer at family care. Promoting the use of apprentice programs, increasing the opportunity for women, minority, individual, disabled veterans, and businesses that are certified by the state of Oregon Certification Office for Business Inclusion and Diversity to perform work under the contract, supporting students who are enrolled in the district's construction CTE program by permitting site tours and through other means that might be identified by the superintendent. We're not near at a point where we could, by the way, where we could actually consider a full like pre-apprentice program and that kind of articulation, but there are some things that we think could be done here. Of course, paying prevailing rate wages at the BOLI prevailing wage rate at or above, and maintaining a harassment-free workplace by conducting a review before beginning project work, using a checklist for employers in this area, such as those provided by EEOC or Oregon Tradeswomen. So the resolution contains a delegation of authority for the superintendent to create procedures and regulations that are necessary to carry it out, including requirements related to record keeping and sharing by contractors. It provides an off-ramp specifically if the application of the community benefits agreement ends up limiting bidding to fewer than 3 qualified bidders, or would result in a substantial cost increase or delay over what is currently anticipated. Then in those circumstances, the superintendent would have authority to bid or rebid the contract without the community benefit terms. So that is all I have. I imagine some of you have questions, and certainly it's not up for an action item tonight, but will be presented again at the next meeting. And it would be critical, if we're going to do this, that it happen at the next meeting. It really becomes too late otherwise.
I see Mary has her hand up.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I guess what really bothers me is we don't pay full health care costs for our employees. And in fact, that's been a point of bargaining in past negotiations. So the fact that we are going to be picking up the contract, we're picking up the full cost of healthcare. Maybe I just don't understand it. It just seems like it's an expensive proposal. And I'm reading the last paragraph because it said, I spoke with someone at the University of Oregon. I don't know who someone is, but, and I understand they're a little bit different than University of Oregon, but he said it drove up their costs 2 to 5%. And that bothers me, given inflation, given the supply chain problems. And I just don't want us to be, way, way, way over budget at Camas. That really gives me some heartburn and some cause to think about this. The other question I have, and I don't know that Christine, if you can answer this, but there was some demographic data provided, which is great, but it's a snapshot in time. How many registrations, how many completions and cancellations, but it doesn't show me any trends over the years, like our unions, are the demographics of the union changing, or just truly offering more opportunities to become involved in trades for women, BIPOC people, and so forth. So that's kind of the problem I have with some of the data that's presented. And I don't know if Christine or you might know any more about that. Do you have some of your background, Christine? Your tech. So those are my 2 concerns. And if you can answer them, great. If you need a little more time, that's okay too. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, my my computer was about to die. So yeah, on the first one, I'm not sure how that it's an accurate statement about the amounts that we pay for family benefits, and I think this is just a policy decision that is for the board to determine. And then your second point was, sorry, Mary, I got distracted.
Okay, you were distracted. Just the demographics. The demographics we have in the memo that was prepared, to me is
sure.
a snapshot in time. I'm just wondering if there's anything a longer period of time where we can see increases in memberships in the different trades who actually have gone on and become members of the trade unions, other than the little snapshot.
I am really not equipped to answer that. I know Judy collected some of that data. I did not, and I'm sorry, but I just don't feel equipped to respond to that. I just don't have the knowledge.
Okay, that's why I said I didn't know if you could answer them, but I just wanted to raise that question. So thanks.
So Mary, I did collect that data, and I'm going to ask and I know there's been a study that's been published since then. I actually can go back to the source, which was from the Labor Commissioner, to get more data with trends. But the indication was it is increasing, but I can get you some data on that. And it definitely was above some of the data that LCC had. I mean, it's not robust, but people are looking at it, that it is much higher than, programs that follow these guidelines have higher percentages in their workforce. But Gordon, you might have something to add with that.
Thanks. Yeah, I could address a couple things. One is that I don't know what this data is from the person at the U of O, but this is designed to not increase our costs at all. Fully paid family medical health insurance is something that is provided for in the prevailing wage law, so it doesn't raise the cost either to the contractor and certainly not to us. And we have a clause, as I think Christine mentioned, that is written into this policy that says the superintendent has discretion to basically drop this procedure and contract something out without the community benefit standards if she believes that it will significantly increase cost or slow down, or there's not enough contractors who could meet that criteria to have it be competitive bidding. On the demographics, I think that I sent to every member of the board, but I can resend it. At just coincidentally, my department, not me, put out a study 2 weeks ago that looked at this and trends over the last decade in apprenticeship enrollment, both union and non-union. And this does not require just union labor, but what the demographic trends show measuring apprenticeships is that there's been significant improvement over the last decade. For workers of color enrolled in apprenticeship programs, it's pretty close to I think even more than the percentage of workers of color in the Oregon workforce as a whole. For women, it's significantly improved, but it's far from where it needs to be. But by every measure, the union apprenticeship programs, again, it's not a requirement to be union, but the union apprenticeship programs have done significantly better than non-union apprenticeship programs in creating opportunities for both for women and for workers of color by the number, measured by the number of people enrolled, by the number of people who graduate as opposed to drop out, and by the number of graduates who actually get into high-paying trades jobs. But I do think as we go forward, this is one of the things that we need to measure. If this is going to be our first thing, we should be measuring what the demographics of both of the workers and the contractors, which we have language about focus on contractors, are, and set targets for ourselves going forward. There are other jurisdictions. There was I've seen something like this from Portland that is just further down the road than we are, that says, well, we need to see this goal of, we want to see 20% of the apprentices be women or something like that. But that's based on data that they have. And I think one of the things that will help in this is have this be a point that we start collecting data and that we require getting that data from the contractors. I have another thing to say, but I'll stop there because I just wanted to answer those questions.
Martina.
Thank you for sharing that, Gordon. And I think, Mary, to your question, and I know some concerns have been raised in the past, not just here, but in lots of discussions about community benefits agreements are about, those very questions about inclusion and whether these unions have been, historically friendly to women or to BIPOC folks, and whether that's changing. I think one of the things that's so powerful about a community benefits agreement is that it really makes clear what our district's priorities are in the people that we're going to contract with. So if we don't have a community benefits agreement, we may still be working with contractors that don't have representation amongst their workforce from women, for example. But we don't have any way to say that is a value of ours, and to contract with us, we want to see progress on that. With a community benefits agreement, we do have a really clear way to say that those are the values that we are looking for, and not just to say that, like, hey, we hope, but also to work with us. Here are the metrics that we're looking for. And I think that that actually gives us some power to push towards that kind of inclusion in a way that is unique to this kind of agreement. And it's one of the reasons why I think that there's such powerful tools that we have. And I hope that we'll be able to see those trends. And like Gordon says, that we'll be able to measure and track some of those things so that we can ensure that this is functioning in the way that I am hoping in this moment that it would.
Maya. You're muted.
Okay. I have two things I wanted to say, and kind of in line with what Martina was saying in terms of values of the district. I think that it would be really well aligned with our movement forward with all of the CTE efforts that we're making, not necessarily in terms of the inclusion of those students in the actual work, but in terms of the messaging behind the district telling students that the myth of the only path forward in a fruitful life is a 4-year college, and that there's other pathways forward that are fulfilling and important components of our community. That what this does is this is our participation in building the workforce space into something that is a place where people will want to go to. There's so many people who make work decisions based on something like family health insurance, that promoting that within the industries of the labor trades, that the trades world, this feels really aligned with all of those efforts. And if we want to tell our students that this is a viable future for them, we need to also invest in creating a viable workspace for them. This feels like this moves towards that. In terms of like the nitpickiness of the actual resolution, in the therefore so be it resolved section, number 1, I know we all received emails talking about roofers and glaziers. This is a term I learned and I'm really excited to use it. I would like to see those based on the information that we received and the complementary component of the resolution that allows Superintendent Vanderkar or whoever's our acting superintendent to make decisions that might need to move beyond the constraints of this, that we include both roofers and glaziers along with framing, drywall, ceiling systems, etc.
So thanks, Maya. I'm going to just add something, then go, Gordon. I just want to say a couple things about, what Gordon said is true about the prevailing wage. I really felt like I need to educate myself, is that with a prevailing wage, there's a percentage of fringe that is provided in that is required in the prevailing wage amount. And that should cover full family. That is able to cover full family. Some contractors choose to use that by maybe paying a higher hourly rate or something that might be different. So we're asking them to use that percentage of that comes with the fringe for the full family benefit. And it is just for the time that they're working on the program, different than maybe all their employment. I don't know. It just depends on the business. So what I heard, I just want to honor our staff that's working on this, the facilities group. They were under the guidance from us to stay within the costs from our bond that we passed in 2018. And we have escalating costs with COVID, and there's a lot of things going on. And I think as a board, by passing this, we are putting our values first. We had a resolution on this, but also we need to be open to see if there could be a slight increase in costs or might not. That's why we're doing this as a pilot, so we know going forward. And then we'll know if we do another bond, when we do other projects, that we build those costs in for sure going forward in a full and robust way. And that's my hope for the future. So I know our staff wants to keep their commitments to us, and we're saying to them that this is really also important to us to do. And we're going to look really carefully at the impact it has as it goes forward. We're hoping it has all the positive impacts that we want it to have. Gordon.
Thank you. I also wanted to appreciate your work, Judy, in helping make this happen, and also that of Christine Nesbitt and Kyle Tucker and Ryan Spain, and maybe other people in the facilities department who've worked in this way, who I'm not aware of. But it was a lot of hard work that I think got us to a very good model. I did want to mention, again, about the equity issues. I know that several of the big unions in Lane County, I think including both the electricians and the plumbers, who are the two biggest unions, have existing relationships, meaning both financial support and organizational relationships with Oregon Tradeswomen, which is the main organization in the state that works to recruit more women for the trades and also to create a pipeline into apprenticeship programs. And I think as we move, if we do this, and as we move forward and we think, all right, what do we want to take from this model and what do we want to build into the future? That one of the things we want to look at is making that even bigger and more robust, the kind of pre-apprenticeship pipelines. And I would like to see that, as Christine mentioned, for our students as well. And obviously we're not at that point, but as we move forward, I think there are things we can start doing, like asking for journey level building trades people to donate some time to mentor our students, possibly to donate used equipment from the training centers that are here in like electrical and plumbing training centers that are here in Lane County to mentor students. Hopefully, if we're, when COVID is done, if we can have an expanded program of building tiny homes to have more active engagement of that. And I think we should be, one of the things we should be using this experiment for, to the extent COVID allows, is to try to also look at how much can we use this to build up the opportunities for our own CTE students. And the last thing I want to say is also what Maya mentioned, which is my understanding is that initially roofing and glazing were not included out of a concern that there might not be enough local contractors for who could meet these criteria for it to be competitively bid. I think that the language that's been that Christine put in, which says, first of all, there have to be a minimum of at least 3 qualified contractors, otherwise it doesn't get bid this way, and that in addition to that, the superintendent has the discretion to go around these requirements if it would raise costs, because the fear is if there's not local contractors and we have to work with a contractor from Portland, and then we may be paying travel costs or overnight per diem costs for workers staying overnight, we wanted to avoid that. So I think that the language is there, but also we did receive emails from both of those unions identifying, I think, either 4 or 5 local contractors who have done this kind of work or who do this kind of work and who meet the qualifications. So from all the evidence that I can see, there is no reason to exclude them, and particularly since we still have the fail-safe of if there's not 3 qualified people, or if the superintendent discovers reason to believe it would increase the cost significantly, we still have that out. Thanks.
I just spoke, so I want to give someone else a chance if they want to, but. Laurel.
I just wanted to back up what Gordon and Maya had both mentioned about adding, and then seeing if we can add that to proposal for when we vote next at the next board meeting.
So what I'd like to ask in relation to that, I don't know, I forwarded the emails to Ryan Spain and Kyle Tucker, and they may not have had a chance to think about it or look at it because it was just yesterday, but I would like to hear their perspective about including or not including. And if tonight isn't a good night, maybe we could put something in the Friday memo if they had any thoughts about it, because I really would like to hear from them as well.
So I'll jump into that.
I'm not going to put you on the spot tonight if you aren't ready. So.
Well, I mean, I'd be, I'm much better having some time to put some thoughts on paper, and I'd much prefer to put it in writing in a Friday memo update. But what I would suggest is that, I did, initially when I received information requesting, more around the roofers, at least specifically the glazers, is something new as of yesterday to me. But around the roofers, I think that's what I shared back with the board, was that currently there's only one contractor in town that typically bids the work that's large enough to be able to bid the larger work that we do. And so, I went back and did a little bit of history today and looked back over the past 10 years on all the re-roofing work that we've done within the district. And we've about 97% of the work that's been done in the district is by that one contractor. The contractors that were provided by the local union around the roofers union, I think you're right, Gordon. I think there were 5 that they mentioned. All but one of them are out of Portland or Portland area. There only is one local, and there are a couple of local non-union contractors in town. And I think that was some of my concerns. I think the work is, on the Camas project is of a size that some of the local non-union contractors might be able to bid the work and be competitive with that work. But I don't think that it's something that they will be competitive with, nor do I think that they'll engage in the CBB because of the requirements. And so I think it will disqualify some of our local contractors, which is what I think I hear you guys say you want to do, is make sure we keep this local and not invite, or try not to invite Portland unless we need them here. So that was my biggest concern around the the roofing contractors and why I was suggesting that we tried to avoid that one. Around glazers, there's 2 in town. Both of them, to my knowledge, are union. I don't believe that there's a non-union in town. So that's one of those that I don't think it really matters to me. I think the union provided 3 names to me, one of which I've never heard of in my 20 years, but it sounds like it's a contractor south of town, more in like a Roseburg area maybe. So haven't ever worked with them, don't know anything about them, but there's more than qualified 2 contractors in town. And so I think that's more than typical of what we would see for glazers on bids, would be those 2 key folks. So.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah. Did someone else? Gordon?
Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate all of that. And like I said, all of your work on this. Excuse me, I had a question about the roofers, and if it's not clear or doesn't make sense to talk about now and you want to keep put it in Friday memo, that's fine. But I'm just wondering if you have heard from non-union contractors who would otherwise be competent to, be good candidates to do the work, who say they won't bid because of the family medical requirement. Is that because I'm not thinking of this as a particularly union versus non-union thing. And I know that there are some non-union contractors who already pay full family medical and meet this. So I'm just curious if you can say, if it's not confidential, what you've heard about that.
Well, what I'll say is that it's been my understanding, and I've heard a couple of you mention tonight that, yes, the fringe inside of a BOLI rate that is paid by a non-union contractor incorporates a certain amount of money for healthcare that, by BOLI law, they either have to pay to the employee if they're not providing the benefit, or as Judy's mentioned, or Chair Newman has mentioned, that our desire is that they use that funding to go towards the healthcare cost. But it's been my understanding from feedback I've received is that that's not enough money to pay for the full family healthcare. So it will be an added cost for a non-union contractor to pick up that difference. Now, how much is that difference? I don't know, but when you compare a union contractor that might have, that's self-insured, that's insured for thousands of potential employees, versus a local contractor that might have 20 employees and trying to go out and buy health insurance for those 20 employees, there's just no way that they're going to be paying equitable rates or equal rates, and it's going to have a cost impact to that local non-union subcontractor. So I think that with the amount of work, I think if we had a different economy where there's not a lot of work available, I think they might be more hungry and might be more apt to join in the requirements of the CPP or the CBA that we come up with. But I do believe that with the market conditions the way they are, is that we will not get that participation from those local contractors because of it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I would just welcome you if there's anything else you want to add to maybe get it to the superintendent to put in the Friday memo, but that was helpful. Thank you. Other comments, questions?
I just would like a block of instruction also on this. Because while I can read all these words and I'm relatively intelligent, this isn't the work I do every day. So I'm like, dang, this is dry.
Laurel, I hear you. I have been studying this now for a while. So,
I just want to be informed I'm definitely pro-union and I want to, but I also want to be able, like when Ryan's talking about that, I want to be able to understand all the nuances that have to do with going on and not leave anybody local out, because I'm just like, well, union, and then like, well, no, local. I want to, so I think, and we've been all pretty quiet, so except for like 3 of us, or you, not me. And so if there's somebody who does this instruction and talks about this and makes this, puts it in Sesame Street cartoon form for me, so I can really digest this well and understand it and make really informed decisions. That's really the crux. I want to make an informed, smart decision on this.
So I would volunteer myself, and Gordon might do the same. I probably could put it in the Sesame Street version because that's about where I was when I started. So I'm happy to do that.
Okay. I like it. Thank you, Judy.
Maybe Kyle or Ryan could, but I've worked on this in other areas. I'm also happy to
Yeah.
Yeah, any
Colin,
questions
yeah.
would be helpful.
We'll
Awesome. I'll just ask Colin, I'll ask them questions and they can tell me if I get it wrong. Like they can test me after they take my training. Thank you.
Oh, that's going to fall on the teacher. So I'm going to bring them in probably. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? I just also wanted, seeing no more questions, I think we're going to close the discussion. But again, I want to really express my appreciation. I know this is something that is coming when I know everyone is working really hard to get the buildings going and keeping the projects moving, and to take time out to really help us work through this. I just want to show great appreciation. And I think it is a great next step. You know, the board does have a resolution on how we feel about community benefits, which does include local and people of color and women, underrepresented people in the trades. So I just am eternally grateful. Thank you. Okay, moving right along. And we're actually, I don't want to get too excited. Oh, we have policies. We have our general counsel, Christine Nesbitt, to talk about some policies that we'll have on the agenda for future action.
There are six policies that are proposed for changes in your board packet, and I'll just walk through them real quickly. So our board policy JHFE is our policy on child abuse reporting. School employees and board members and others are mandatory reporters. The proposed changes are to make a clarification that child abuse reporting is triggered when an employee has a reason to believe that, quote, any person with whom the child is in contact or with whom the employee is in contact has abused a child. Our prior or existing language is a little bit more limited, and so could be misleading for staff. So we need that clarification. Another change in this policy is to incorporate the flexibility that was included in 2021 legislation that would allow the district to appoint a non-TSPC licensed staff member to serve as the central point of contact when a child abuse report involves a district employee or contractor, agent, or volunteer. So when there's when it's a matter of someone, one of our employees or volunteers or contractors, and we have to have a process so that there's not only a DHS report, but that it's reported centrally as well, so that we can place that person on leave or take measures to separate them from students. So the third change is just to re-letter the policy, and this is a little bit confusing, but the OSBA has a system of lettering, and they wanted to place this both in Chapter G and in Chapter J, so that it would be both in the student section and the employee section. So hopefully that will increase transparency and accessibility of the policy for some. So we want to follow OSBA's protocols where we, and practices here where we can. It just makes it easier for future revisions. So we also have a policy, moving on to the next one, GBNAA and JHFF. Again, it's the re-lettering issue that they want to re-letter it. And also there's a change to the definition of sexual conduct, excuse me. And so it's a somewhat technical, and I don't feel like I need to go through it. It's in the board packet, but it just is to make sure that our policy mirrors statutory language as changed by the 2021 legislature. policy IGBHA, alternative education programs. The changes there are to really to just better align the policy with state administrative rules. There is not a major substantive change. This is a situation where OSBA identified that, you know, some language needed to be just better written, and that is what they have proposed. IGDJ, so that relates to interscholastic activities. The 2021 legislature passed a law that would require school districts to allow students who are enrolled in a district or education service district provided general education or GED program who reside in the district to participate in interscholastic activities. So the proposed change is really to update that in accordance with the new law. These policies are your board policies, and they can be approved as written. They can be, you could ask staff to go research more or consult with more people, or whether certain changes might be appropriate to them, or not approve the policy revisions. We do recommend approval of the policy revisions, although that will be at a subsequent meeting. Looking at these from an equity perspective, the proposed policy changes under consideration are modest and primarily intended to reflect legal changes. And in many cases, the policy changes at issue are required by those laws. In terms of including other stakeholders, folks have the opportunity to comment on proposed policies. As per the board policy on policy development, they've got an opportunity to comment on proposed changes. The ones relating to child abuse and sexual conduct are intended to support all students in the district, particularly those who have been subjected to sexual conduct or abuse. And we do want to note that children in more vulnerable populations are statistically more likely to be targeted for sexual abuse. So keeping those policies up to date is especially critical. Proposed changes in interscholastic activities policy increases access to high school interscholastics for students enrolled in GED programs. With that, I can take any questions if you have any, or it'll be brought back at a future meeting.
Martina.
So not necessarily a question, but I think one of the things that's, I think this is all really important, and obviously that we need to be in compliance. I just want to speak quickly to some of the challenges around mandated reporting. There's been some, Christine knows what I'm going to say because I've talked about this before. There's been some confusion amongst some districts in Oregon related to whether or not consensual sexual activity amongst minors who are close in age, so there's a 3-year age gap rule, would also be reportable. And in September of 2018, Attorney General Rosenblum issued very clear guidance that said, no, it's not necessarily reportable, and that each instance should be taken seriously and should be considered by a staff person. But when 2 minors are close in age to 16-year-olds, for example, and are engaging in consensual sexual activity, and they disclose that to a trusted adult, that trusted adult does not necessarily need to make that report. I think that's important to say, because one of the factors that we know often leads to greater risk for kids is lack of a trusted adult in their life with whom they can talk, particularly about issues related to sex and sexuality. Not having a trusted adult with whom they can speak without fear of reporting puts them at greater risk. And particularly when it comes to teenagers engaged in consensual sexual behavior, we want them to be able to talk to adults, to ask questions about things like how to get contraception and how to ensure that they are engaging in contact in ways that are safe and healthy for all people involved. So I just think it's important every time I get a chance to talk about reporting that we make that really clear, because mandated reporting laws can unintentionally lead to circumstances where vulnerable kids are made more vulnerable by having trusted adults sort of taken away from them.
Other comments? Thank you, Martina. I've actually had those conversations in our own program, for sure. Laurel, you look like you're unmuting. Yeah, great.
Well, I would just want to, I can see how this needs to be approved because it's legalities that we have approved in the past and are just being changed. But I also really want to have that discussion, Martina, because that sounds like something we can put in part of our policies, that we are aware and about this and want to. I'm not going to say it right. I'm getting tired, but in the work that you do and your knowledge around this, and I've heard this before, and I've heard this along lines of kids that are either unhoused as well, that are scared to talk and tell the truth because they know they'll get removed from where they're staying or something. So I just want to, I know that's a nuance that's really hard to work on. It involved probably our mental health staff and things like that to understand, what is allowable for us to be part of. And it's not, I realize, Christine, part of this discussion, but I just wanted to, I didn't want to just say, thanks, Martina. I wanted to say, yes, that's a discussion we should be having at some point.
And possibly a discussion to have with the legislature, because just because an attorney general says it, the reality is the statute says what it says. And so that's a problem, because an attorney general, with all due respect, that just doesn't have the same weight as the statute. And so that's a problem. And there's another statutory fix that needs to happen in there that Martina is aware of. And maybe that's something that the legislative committee can look at some point.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say part of the reason why I, every time this has come forward, haven't, proposed that we make any changes to board policy is because, these board policies are really meant to align with the letter of the law. And as Christine just said, the Attorney General's opinion is very helpful, and it is also not, it's her interpretation of the law. It is not the language of the law itself. My personal belief is that mandated reporting law is really well-intentioned legislation written by people who don't necessarily work in the field with kids who are at high risk, because in my experience, it can often have those unintended consequences of making kids more likely to become systems involved in ways that are not healthy. Those are things I would love our legislative committee to take up, and also things that I know are really big issues that I think are going to be well outside of just this board's capacity to change, though I wish.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, it's the kind of thing we can put on our list of, if they come up with other groups that would take a lead on this, we would support them or something like that. So great. Okay. No more questions for our council here. You get to be excused. Thank you, Christine. It's a lot of work to do with all these policies. Okay. We actually are at the point where we're going to talk a little bit about our working agreements. That's the next item on the agenda. And we have 20 minutes set aside, and I'm going to ask Lisa, because we could go all night on these. So we're going to try to keep to our time limit on that. So Lisa, would you help by reminding us when we're at about 20 minutes? I would appreciate it. Okay. I think that's a yes. Okay. So where we left off was on duties and responsibilities. And it's up to you. You can work off of either document with track changes or without track changes. It's your preference. And there was an item 3 and 4 that Mary had some comments under duties and responsibilities and role of board leadership. And I want to give everyone a minute to get there. You can give me eye contact when you're there, maybe. How's that?
You said it's 3 and 4, but I'm on your graph, your table, and there is no 3 and 4.
On the side by side,
I'm on the.
Laurel's looking at what was in the board packet, Judy. Me too.
oh, on the side by side chart.
I'm on a chart that has everybody's names on it. Yep.
Yes, okay. Well, I think Mary gave that feedback after the chart was created, after she had a chance to read these. So she did
Oh,
comments on, she did have comments that I'm going to ask her to share right now on items 3 and 4.
So I'll
Are
just
you-
say also,
Are
if it
you
would,
on page, are you on page 101 of the packet?
Martina, are you in the packet? I have
I
printed.
am.
I'm in the packet.
Yeah, if so, again, there's a couple different versions, depending on how it's easier for folks to see things. So if you're in the version that has like colorful track changes, then yes, page 101, or what is listed as 101 in the packet. So under duties, responsibilities, and role of board leadership. If you like a version where all the track changes are hidden, and it's a little easier to read for some folks, then that would, you would find yourself on page 108 of the packet.
Mary, are you ready with that?
What do you want me to speak on?
Well, I think what your comments were on number 3, board leadership in conjunction with the superintendent will provide a list of board meetings, topics at least once a month. Leadership will take extra care to prioritize items. Excuse me. This list, the thing that you had highlighted was this list is subject to change by a majority vote of the board.
I did. I guess I'm not sure what you're looking at. I mean, I'm confused. Item number 3, right?
Yes. You had highlighted that when you sent the email to me.
Oh,
And number 4, you highlighted will seek ratification of these assignments at the same meeting. Those 2 phrases.
okay. That one I can't find it. I'm looking at the track changes version. I don't see it in red, so this is confusing. Okay.
Well, we didn't make the changes. You just want to talk about them. We hadn't gotten there yet.
Okay.
it's underlined. It's in that section on number 3 underlined, Mary. If you didn't put it in color.
Where it says leadership will take extra care, that last sentence? Is that what, I just want to make sure I'm on the right sentence, because this is
The
confusing.
sentence you had highlighted is this list on number 3,
Oh.
this list is subject to change by a majority vote of the board. Would you like to come back to that?
I guess you know, it was a long time ago when I sent that. So I think my initial concern was, why do you need that last sentence there when you've got, you know, leadership is going to prioritize it if you've got 3 members that want to do it. So we've made that decision, and then the majority comes back and overrides it. So why give the minority, the 3 votes, the power or the opportunity to say that? It just seems counterproductive, and it seems like the majority can override the minority. The whole point of this is to make sure that there's an opportunity for minority voice. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of extra words that you don't need. So
Maya,
Mary, can I just ask for some clarification?
Sure.
Are you saying that if a proposal for an addition to the future agenda is agreed upon by 3 hand raisings or nods or whatever we want to call it, it is then going to find its way onto an agenda?
it's going to find its way to leadership, who will determine if it will be on an agenda. So that should stand, and that should honor the rights of the minority. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but
Right.
but you know, there has to be an opportunity for a dissenting opinion. I'll put it that way, to use Supreme Court terms. So then if you say, okay, here are 3 people, we're going to refer this to leadership because we think it's important, But then you say, but 4 people can override that. So why do you need 4 people to override it? 4 people can override to begin with. Why give the 3 votes to put it on the agenda when the 4 votes can come around and pull the rug out? That's what I don't understand. You're effectively canceling the dissenting opinion of the 3 that want to have. And I don't know that it's a dissenting, but why put that in there? That's all.
Gordon.
Thank you.
I see this mostly as ratifying the fact that a majority vote of the board can always change the agenda, right? Can always, you know, at the beginning of the meeting when we do agenda reviews, you can always change that by majority vote. I mean, my understanding is that right, anything with three head nods or votes or whatever, leadership will figure out some way to deal with, which may be putting on the agenda or maybe something else. And then if a majority feels more strongly that no, we want to see something else, or we want to see that sooner and not just in a Friday memo, that you can always do that by majority votes. Unless I misunderstand it, that seems to me just to kind of restate what is already the case about being able to change the agenda with majority vote. If that's wrong and then there's some other procedure it's creating, then let me know, because then I've misunderstood.
Mary.
Well, in the section that I'm reading it in, it talks about the responsibility of leadership. So the three people, which is a minority of the board, you know, or dissenting opinion, can say, we think this is important to talk about. So then leadership says yes, no, puts it where it is. But certainly, yeah, 4 people can obviously override it, but I don't think this is in relationship to like the agenda itself, you know, approving the agenda during a meeting. It just seems like if 3 people can say, we think this is important, we want to talk about it, leadership, please follow up, either put in a Friday memo or schedule a work session or whatever. That should be the end of it. It shouldn't then allow the board majority of 4 people to say, nope, you know, and pull it out from underneath, you know, the 3 people that want to talk about that. That's my confusion. Like that always exists. But if you're going to honor the ability to someone say, this is really important to me, and find 2 people that want to support that, then I think we should honor that.
I completely agree, Mary. So I don't know, maybe you or Martina can clarify what you intended with the language. I agree with what you said, Mary.
Gordon, I'm looking at the side-by-side chart and they were your edits. So if you're good to take them out, let's take it out. The side-by-side chart said these comments came from you and we added them from your edits. So I'm happy to take them out.
Because certainly 4, okay, sorry.
I mean, the only thing that I think is important about that if it's someplace else, which I think it is, we don't need it here, is that the majority can say no, instead of having somebody put on the Friday memo or something be deferred for 2 months. We want to have it on the agenda now. But I did not intend it to mean what Mary's fear was, which that we could say, no, I don't care. The 3 people said they want to hear this. We don't ever want to hear about that. I think I agree with Mary on that.
So could we take it out since we do have that in other agenda setting items?
No, I think it was because new board members didn't know. And you guys all had kittens when I brought something and changed the agenda. And and we read the board agreements before we start, right? That's one of the things that is sent to us before we start. It would be really helpful to understand where these processes come in and habits somewhere. It can't just be like, we just know, because I can tell you, we don't always know until we know.
But that's in a different section, which we already discussed, and we already agreed to those changes about agenda setting, and it's towards the latter part of the working agreements. This section deals with the roles and responsibility of board leadership and how board leadership works with the rest of the board to set the agenda, which is a different issue than bringing something up at the meeting, Laurel, because we did talk about that at a previous meeting, and I think we actually all agreed upon that about 2 months ago. But this for me is talking about the role of leadership, and I think we have to be fairly clear about that. I see Martina, I'll be quiet, because leadership changes, so I think we have to have some fairly consistent expectations around board leadership, and I'll be quiet.
Okay, we have Martina and then Gordon.
I think that this can get really confusing. And so I thought it might be helpful to make a clarification because, we talk about like reviewing the agenda and making the agenda in terms of like each individual board meeting and that process, which Laurel, I think is what you were referring to, right? That the process by which a member might change the agenda of a meeting during that meeting. And this section is the one that's or this item in particular is the one that's talking about how agendas in general get created and what leadership's role is if the board gives our head nods that yes, that item should be on a board agenda at some point, that this is how leadership will go about putting them on. So it's like creating an agenda in a much bigger sense. I think that those two things it's confusing to keep those two things separate.
And it's on page 104, what you're talking about, Martina.
Yeah. So I think that's what I'm hearing. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it's important for clarification because I know it's part of leadership agenda making, but to know that you can change the agenda is not apparent anywhere else. Or the agenda, okay, what we're not calling the agenda of that night, but the calendar.
Agendas in general.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful distinction.
Gordon.
I just say that I agree it would be good to keep it, but Mary, if you wanted to propose language to make it clear that we're not talking about the thing that you were afraid of, which is getting rid of what 3 people want, I'd be certainly open to that.
Well, it's in the board, it's in the section on board leadership. So it's not about setting the agenda in the larger sense, but it just seems like just cut the whole sentence out because it just counteracts the previous sentence.
So I don't want to cut the whole sentence out, because I don't think it counteracts the previous sentence, but if you want to add something to make it clear that it's not taking away that right of 3 people to put something on the agenda, I would support that. I don't know what the language would be. But
I don't want to take that away. So, but
Yeah.
I don't want to take it away. That's my whole point. I'm sorry. I'll be quiet.
Okay, Alicia.
Okay, now that we have determined it's Gordon's language, Gordon, can you explain to me again? I heard bits and pieces. What are you trying to do with this? And Laurel, I appreciate what you were saying, but I think it would be confusing because what you're trying to adjust is in the big meeting, or what you're trying to clarify is in the big meeting. And this is about board leadership. I could take a stab at it, and if you could tell me if I'm right, Gordon, or you could try it again for me.
okay, I think that, what our process is, 3 people say we want to talk about whatever. Leadership decides in what form does it make sense for that to be addressed. Friday memo, information, item for action, whatever it is. And so this is I guess a limitation on leadership's discretion to say like, yes, that's leadership's role. But if a majority of the board thinks, no, it should be here on the agenda instead of being delayed for 3 months, or it should be an item for action instead of an item of information, that you can always do that by a majority vote. And the language that is later on that I think Mary was talking about is we can talk about that later, but talks about in exceptional circumstances. And I think, of course, like we don't want this to be regular practice, but that's my aim, is like kind of about not just about the particular meeting, but about when and how is something going to get addressed. If a majority says, no, this is really urgent, we want to see it addressed in this way at this time, we can do that by majority.
Okay, can I ask you a question? If we do it well, and I'm not saying we have, and I appreciate the kitten comment. I haven't heard that, Laurel. I had kittens. I'm sorry I missed that meeting. It sounds like such a fun one. Wouldn't we be able to do this under Robert's Rules of Order? So say we want to talk about adopting kittens to every student, okay? 3 people want to put it on the agenda and leadership drags their feet, not blaming them, but they just have other things. But 4 of us find that that's really important. So we would say tonight on the agenda, we want to add adoption of kittens. That's how that would happen within the system, right? Am I right? That's how we would do it as a majority. That's where it would belong. And I think clarity on that would be really helpful. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, but I'm willing to hear if you guys thinking something different.
I think that's the main way it would happen, and I agree that you can do that under Robert's rules already. So this is the working agreement is just kind of codifying our expectations. But I also think if leadership said, well, we've decided that the kittens is going to happen in May because it's not important enough to happen in November, right? So it's not about tonight's agenda, that a majority vote could say, no, kittens has to happen before January 1st or whatever, right? That it's not, so it's not only about the specific meeting's agenda, but a little bit broader in how we plan what topics will come up when.
Okay,
And I just think it's important to read them in the sections in which they're placed and then look at the document as a whole.
Yep.
Because there's a section on agenda setting, which Laurel's called out. And again, this is just talking about the function of board leadership, and trying to balance that role so that everyone feels heard.
so I think what I'm summarizing of what I hear being said is that if three members of the board sent something to leadership and it wasn't getting on the agenda, or we put it in the Friday memo, that you could bring those members could bring it up again at the board meeting.
Only if it was a majority, not just 3 members.
Anyone can make an emotion and you get 4 people and it's a fact. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Martina.
So in hearing what folks have said, I have a proposed alternate language that both reflects kind of the need to point to that other section and also maybe clarify some of what we're talking about. So perhaps we could remove that sentence and replace it with a majority of the board may make changes to the list of future topics as per the section on agenda setting. So it's kind of giving us an arrow so that we can know where to look for a richer and fuller explanation of that process. Do we think that would suffice? I see Gordon's hand.
I can't remember if we already agreed on the agenda setting thing. I think that would be fine. And my only feeling is like we have this language here in item 5 under agenda setting. It says on occasion, in exceptional circumstances. So I agree with the in exceptional circumstances in terms of saying, here's our intent that this be a rare thing, that, but not that, I just want to be clear that we're not saying that there's some definition of exceptional or there's somebody who's empowered to say, no, this isn't exceptional. That's just a majority decision.
May I pause? I think we still have to get to that item later because there are some, there's more conversation that needs to happen about that. Can we check the box on this item with the expectation that we'll be having more discussion about the rest of the agenda setting item in
but the language that you said says as per
right
here, which we haven't settled yet what it says. Is that right?
Right, but can we agree that we are going to settle that hopefully in the near future, and that would address, and so therefore we can just point to that with the expectation that we're going to be doing it.
So I think, let me just say, I think that is not the item it would refer to. That particular item number 4 under agenda setting is if we wanted to add something to an agenda that wasn't noticed for action. And I think what Gordon is saying, it's not getting on soon enough. So it would really be on number 3 on the board, that it's really on the irregular item for future agenda items saying, I didn't like it was in the board pack, in the working, is that correct? I mean, I think we're looking at 2 different purposes. So Gordon gave me a thumbs up. So could we reference that item, Gordon?
So how about as per item number 3 in the section agenda setting? Does that work for us?
Thank you.
Laura. I see Laurel has a hand.
Well, I mean, yes, that works. And also it works exactly how it's written too. So I know that will mean we spent 20 minutes on nothing, but but it means both mean the same thing. So
I'm going to suggest we go with the change because it didn't mean that to Mary. So Mary read it very differently. So I think we've now corrected it that it now reads the way we all could read it the same way, right? Okay. I just got a text from Lisa that we just hit our time. So congratulations, we got through one item. And I would say at our next meeting, I'd hope to talk about the 3-minute time limit for our own comments, but we'll bring that up at our next meeting. Okay, just so everyone knows. Give it some thought. Mary?
Well, the agenda says topic guest presentations. That's not what the briefing summary says, but were we just talking about this tonight, or are we going to talk about guest presentations? That was
Yeah, we're not gonna, we just went back to, I'm sorry, that we didn't correct that in the agenda.
okay. That's all. I was confused.
We had 20 minutes and we have many items to get through. So
Okay.
we got through one. Yay. Okay.
Judy, can I?
Yeah, I said Alicia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even hear you. Okay, I know this is just probably going way out on a limb, but I kind of feel like we might be able to get the agreement for 3 minutes, because I've had people say if the audience gets 3 minutes, we should get 3 minutes. I just think if people felt comfortable with that, and then as we bring students on, we want to make sure that we don't spend the first hour, that we get to the business. And I know that it kind of caught everybody by surprise this week, but if we could kind of just give head nods, if people are okay with it. If they're not, I don't need to push it, but I was kind of feeling like we might be able to get that taken care of. But it's fine if you guys aren't okay. Let's not talk about it.
Maya.
I fully support that. I would also support having some language in there that, much like everybody else who speaks at our meeting, that Lisa be our timekeeper and not fellow board members.
Thank you, Maya. And Lisa is actually researching. She's going to get an app with a timer for us, and we'll have it by our next meeting for all the speakers. So I think that would be great. Thanks for that suggestion. Laurel, and then Gordon. Laurel, you're muted. Can't hear you.
It was so good. Anyway, I agree as well, as long as we can put ourselves back in the queue. I do watch how city council does it, and they go and they can put themselves back in the queue. I don't agree for our statements, but I think we could have something like less than 5 minutes, definitely, to aim for 3. But if it goes a little bit over for something passionate, fine.
I think you're talking about our statements, our comments now. So it sounds like you don't agree.
Yeah, no, I don't agree. I'm talking about all these other things we talk about in circles with no system to it. Because they have an actual clock with a light on it in city council, which they mind. It works.
Well, that we could bring that one back. That wasn't what the original proposal was, for 3 minutes for our own comments. So is that what you were speaking to, Alicia?
It was, and I have to say, it kind of goes back to when we limited our teacher representatives and our classified representatives, that we kind of honor the same thing. We don't get more. That's just kind of my thing. So anyway, so I thought we could do it in 3 minutes, but if we need to talk about it, let's not try to push it. I just was hoping, we might move fast on that.
Gordon, you've been waiting. Why don't you comment?
I'll just say quickly, which I think just results in saying we should talk about it another time. I think 3 minutes is a good thing to aim at, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't strictly police it. I think our comments are different from comments from members of the audience. We're the elected officials. We have like lots and lots of subjects we may want to talk about. I also would honestly give more time to the employee representatives, because I think there's a lot of information that is useful to get from them, but that's a whole different discussion. But anyway, I don't think for me, it's not like a quick agreement tonight and then we can all go home.
Okay, that's great. Well, then we will talk about it next time. It sounds like we couldn't come to quick agreement, so I appreciate that. And I asked that if we do want to not be really strict, what are the parameters, so we can talk about that next time. Thank you. All right. Oh, Laurel, your hand's up. Are you okay? Can we wait till next time, or?
I just want to say this is the chance where we can get to talk. We have so many rules about how we can talk all together and share information, and this is it. And then to be like, let's squish that even more is hard. And I do believe we need to work on some of this communication stuff. That's why it's one of our goals, and this could be part of it. So thank you.
So maybe we'll talk about what the purpose of our comments are to begin with in that conversation next time. These are just the comments at the beginning of the meeting, because I don't think we talk with each other, but that'd probably be a good place to start. So thank you.
Who would, that sounds like somebody's trying to give the purpose of the comments to us instead of, I mean, that could be written down somewhere.
Alicia.
Yeah, I think starting with that would be a good idea because the purpose has shifted. It used to be, if you see committee reports, and that's kind of what it used to be. So I think being clear, all 7 of us in agreement for, you know, what are we using that time for, will be a good conversation. So yeah, I appreciate it. Sorry, I tried to push something. I won't do it again.
Well,
It'll be a good conversation to have.
It really sounds like the real motivation around this is to narrow voices, which is not something I'm going to be on board with.
My motivation was definitely to try to get our meeting shorter. So I said up front, that was my motivation.
And I want to be clear, it's not to limit voices, because we have a whole meeting that we have voices. It's just, you know, having conversations with people who, you know, just history of people asking us why we get more time. And you're right, we are the elected officials. And then if we decide we should have more time, that's a good point. I just want to have the conversation. And I also want to get out before 11 o'clock. But, you know, if that's the important place to put our voice, let's put it there.
Okay. So we'll continue this conversation. So
we get the whole rest of the meeting to talk.
Right. Okay, last item, I believe we are on items for future agenda. And anyone has some future agenda items to bring up at this time?
Well, I'd like to spend some time talking about the kittens that I proposed earlier. No, just kidding.
We will consider that in leadership. So then I'm just going to say that everyone knows we have a work session with Alma Advisory Group on December 8th, starting at 5:30. And going from 5:30 to 7:30, just give yourselves 2 hours. And we will be getting timelines and getting our search started with them. And please respond with some times, because they'd like to talk to each one of us before that meeting on the 8th. If you can find 45 minutes in your schedule, they're going to be really flexible with us. So please schedule with Lisa. And then the 15th, we have our regular board meeting, the last one before we have winter break. And we'll probably have an executive session before that for sure to talk more about the what we talked about at the last one. Mary.
Well, you know, we've just rather cavalierly we've assigned another duty to Lisa, and I just think we ought to be cognizant of the fact that she's also running our meetings. And, you know, I just think we need to be careful what we add to her plate, and just, you know, she does a lot for us, and just to say, well, she can be our timekeeper. I just, you know, we need to appreciate her for what she does.
I agree. And I talked with her, and it's just going to be an app that's going to be there. So thank you for reminding us. And yeah. Okay. I saw a hand. Maya.
I just want to remind folks that if you could send in suggestions for the equity committee by Tuesday, the 7th, I believe, that would be really helpful. By 5 p.m., send them to Alicia, Sydney, myself, all 3 of us. And thank you. And I will send out an email, but while I was thinking of it.
Thank you.
Can we get a list of who already is being put forward, or should we just hope that it is not a duplicate?
So I don't think it's necessarily top secret within the board or like the world at large, Laurel, but just because of how the process has taken shape, the lists are not in one place. So That's not really a total answer. It just means that I don't, I'm not sure. I would hate to offer up a list and have it be incomplete and have it be seen as complete, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. All right, then I believe this meeting of the board is adjourned at 10:08.
Thanks, Judy.